OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along. It is Tuesday morning. We're on mute. That's great. That's the perfect start, isn't it? On mute. Owen, how are you? Good morning to you.
Good now. Good morning.
Yeah. So we've got a very busy programme for you. The power rankings are coming a little bit later on. You can roundly abuse Owen in advance, or you can keep your powder dry and, give it to him properly after that happens. We're going to talk with Daniel Harris about the success of the England team so far and what might be about to happen. The Goldman Sachs, or one of the big city firms, have predicted that England are going to win on penalties against Spain in the final. That's what their statistical model suggests. So I don't know if that's a good outcome for everybody, or if that's your worst nightmares realised. I'm not sure. There are two quick things that I want to talk about off the top here. We'll get to Arsene Wenger's notion about the World Cup being played every 2 years in a moment. Just, your initial reaction is no. And then, maybe just live with it for a second. And The Athletic have helpfully rubbed it in the faces of their Irish subscribers this morning that Jack Grealish and Declan Rice could actually play for Ireland, but for the perfidious Albion approach that the FA took on. What's going on?
Just trying to read this, so apologies if I haven't got a full grasp on this at the moment. But it's them, not us, bringing it up this morning. Let's just say when I saw it pop up in the Athletic this morning, I was like, I have to read this. The headline on the piece: everyone can now see why we had to act. The fight for Grealish and Rice to play for England. It's Daniel Taylor and Greg Evans. But a lot of interesting detail on this. There's a lot you can look into and say, okay, the FAI didn't do so badly here, or more importantly, there's little notes of hope here when it comes to maybe future cases that the FAI may be faced with. This has all the hallmarks of your classic playing hard to get romantic story, and I think that there was a little bit of that going on the FA side, that they have quotes here from a number of people in the underage setups in England, the senior setups in England, people from various clubs and people on the Irish side as well. And the main theme from the English side was that they realised how talented these two kids were for a long, long time, and their main way to get them was to cool the jets a little bit, not to come on too hard. There are a couple of quotes in here where it's kind of like the FAI maybe went in a little bit too hard to try and get these guys to commit, which is not what you want to be doing with a player of that age. So,
everybody, the success, the winner writes history, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's quotes here from Dan Ashworth, who was formerly obviously involved with Brighton at the moment. He was the FA's Director of Elite Development when these players were underage players, and he said that there was an understanding at the top of the FA that they couldn't be too aggressive, as happens with some other countries. He says it was about letting the players know that they were always on our radar, explaining about the pathway that could be open with England, what happens at St George's Park, and making that initial contact. But it was important right from the start of the process not to badger or pester the players. There's also they speak to people who've been involved at underage level as well. The idea that Grealish was torn between the Republic and England. We'd already tried to make a move for Jack from the Republic and persuade him to come to England when he was younger. So this is before he becomes a really talented young senior international. But the main thing that was keeping this thing in Ireland's court, or that had given the Irish quite a lot of hope, was that Jack Grealish was getting underage caps earlier than he would have got at England. So playing for the under-17s when he's 15, or 19s when he's 17. I can't quite remember, but basically England never had the opportunity to give them those caps. There were people who were younger than them, higher along their development, and with a much bigger talent pool. Obviously, it was much bigger for Ireland to be able to give Grealish and Rice those opportunities, which I think is the hopeful note from this, which is the one thing that Ireland do have going for them, that if they have a kid who is extremely talented and who can possibly represent a multitude of different nationalities, they do have that they'll be able to give them earlier opportunities. In England, they'll be able to show them the setup a little bit easier than England and earlier than England, and as a result of that might actually give themselves a better chance. They go into detail on the two different sides of the story. I don't think the Declan Rice stuff is overly new, as far as I'm aware anyway. I kind of parsed through the detail there, and there's nothing there that I haven't heard before. But with Jack Grealish, there is stuff here that I hadn't heard before. Maybe I'm wrong here, but maybe the Grealish thing is just an older story, and maybe my short-term memory loss has affected me here. So they say that the Athletics information is that there was a meeting arranged on a strictly need-to-know basis between Jack Grealish and Roy Hodgson on a Friday night at Villa Park early in the 2015-16 season. So at this point, Grealish was 19 years of age. He had taken a year-long sabbatical from international football to gather his thoughts. So that was his making my mind up moment. So he was watching from the stands. Manchester United got beaten 1-0. Manchester United had beaten Villa 1-0. And then an hour or so after the full-time whistle, he was led to an executive box by Roy Hodgson. And Hodgson was there waiting for him. Now, Grealish had previously been invited to a meeting with Martin O'Neill, and he'd gone to that meeting with O'Neill with his agent. Hodgson was adamant that there would be no agents at this meeting. He wanted to speak to Grealish one-on-one, and this is a great quote from Roy Hodgson. "I'm the England manager. Agents speak to club directors and maybe even the club managers, but as England manager, I don't speak to agents. I'm more than happy to speak to the boy, I'm more than happy to speak to his manager, and more than happy to speak to his parents, but I don't go to meetings where an agent sits there and tells me what to do. Maybe the FA will have to if the boy insists his agent is there, but I'm not prepared to do that." I mean, we have quite often, maybe rightly or wrongly, suggested that there's a commercial aspect to these decisions, and maybe the first thing on the minds of an agent is the commercial aspect to these decisions, and maybe the presence of an agent in those conversations is absolutely not what you want when it comes to these things. Another key component in the Grealish thing.
Can I just say, I think that makes it sound like he wanted to play for England, that like he didn't insist on bringing the agent, that you know, the fact that Hodgson felt confident enough to say no to that made him believe that the kid wants to play for the country of his birth as opposed to the country of his dad's birth. Or his grandfather? I can't remember Grealish. Was his dad?
But both of his grandfathers are Irish, and then obviously his father as well.
Right. Like, that would seem to me, you know, if O'Neill met him with the agent, you know, O'Neill can't... O'Neill can say you can't bring the agent and be, like, gung-ho about the whole thing. But if he is, then, you know, you can only do that from a position of strength, and that position of strength must be that he wants to play for England. And in which case, I say fair enough.
100%. And if it's not Roy Hodgson who, I think it's fair to say it was Grealish who always wanted to play for England. But if it wasn't Roy Hodgson that we're giving credit to, we can give credit to Tim Sherwood as well for this decision. He's also quoted in this piece saying he was under a bit of pressure. And Sherwood says, "My view is that ultimately it's down to the boy. It's where he feels his heart is. He played for Ireland's under-21s and they'd given him the trophy for Young Player of the Season, which was them trying to force the issue. He was having a good time with Ireland. But I said to Jack, if you were my son, and I believe in you as I do, I'd be telling you to play for England." I just always felt there would be a time when England could do it. I told Jack that. First and foremost, I think you're good enough. And I think you're an England international, but it has to be your decision. And he said, "I think I've made my mind up. It's going to be England." So there you go. Tactics Tim is the reason why Jack Grealish plays for England.
It's good that Tim Sherwood feels confident enough to betray the privacy of that conversation now to the good people at The Athletic to claim credit at the last moment. It's funny how you described that. The meeting when he was 19, he was sat in the stands watching. Was he injured? Or
he was injured, yeah.
He was injured, okay.
Yeah.
Tactics Tim was definitely playing him at every available opportunity.
An injury meant he was watching from the stands.
Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify that, I love that detail. That's like, I mean, that's good detail from Sherwood and Hodgson. In fairness, there is more, maybe looser information here. It says after that point, then, as a Premier League player, Grealish would come up against Irish players, and I'm quoting here: Grealish would come up against Irish players from other Premier League sides who would try to get under his skin. Some would call him a plastic paddy. When he announced his switch to England, he opened himself to more of the same, only worse. More than once he was told on the pitch what some Irish players thought of his decision. Heat of the moment stuff perhaps, but not very pleasant all the same. One incident became so intense that one of Grealish's senior teammates had to step in and get involved. Then they go into the aspect of Roy Keane becoming an assistant manager at the club that he was at. And the quote, "Keane was about as subtle as a sledgehammer." There is an unnamed former teammate of Jack Grealish who was quoted here saying it wasn't that easy because Roy Keane was our assistant at the time. He was always in Jack's ear trying to get him to play for Ireland. So it's I should just not have clicked on the piece this morning, but there's definitely a sense that we are the desperate ex-boyfriend trying to get the love of our lives back.
I mean, it would have been worth it though, right? It would have been worth
Think
it.
of all the great memories we could have made along the way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know that there will be people saying, "Why are we bringing this up again? What are we talking about?" But like,
It's in the paper. It's in the.
yeah, like forgive me. I just couldn't not click on it when I saw it this morning, and I just couldn't not talk about it. It's yeah. I'm taking in a hopeful note from it as well. Keep capping those kids at underage level and giving them opportunities, because there's a bloody big talent pool over there in England, and they're not going to be able to give them the same level of exposure to the higher echelons of the upper echelons of the underage game, and maybe just maybe one of these things will drop into Republic of Ireland's way one day.
I'm just reading a piece here from last November in the Examiner by John Fallon, where he's spoken to Jack Grealish's dad, who says that he bumped into Mick McCarthy. Mick had just returned to the Ireland job. We got talking at the BBC Personality of the Year Awards through a mutual friend, explained Jack's dad, Kevin, whose parents were born in Kerry and Galway. Mick asked if Jack would be interested in playing for Ireland, saying he could see him easily winning 40 caps. 140, Mick. That would have been the like he would have stuck him in the team and he never would have left, and he would have played every minute of every game because, like, let's face it, he's pretty good.
Sorry, so it's both grandparents on his father's side then, according to that piece. My apologies, I got that wrong. Yeah, like, I mean, what a... Who will eventually write the book on this thing is my question. I think the book kind of needs a happy ending, and there needs to be another...
Do they talk about it? Because this piece here says that Grealish went cool on Ireland after O'Neill overlooked him for a senior debut in 2014. He left him behind for the 2 games against Costa Rica and Portugal in America.
Wow, that's that particular thing isn't mentioned here. Like the Rice and McCarthy stuff is touched on, and McCarthy is quoted in this piece as well. When Rice rings him to tell him the news, McCarthy says, "I was very abrupt. There was no, oh, thanks for letting me know, good luck with that, and I hope it goes well for you." It was the opposite of that.
I mean, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
The stuff about the Irish players giving them crap on the field, like, well, you know, what are they supposed to do? Oh, yeah, that's fine. International football doesn't matter to me. Not? I think that's fine, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, like, there's no kind of specifics to it as well. Like, I'm not surprised that sort of stuff goes on, to be quite honest. Like, it is what it is. It's
what
like
it is.
It's good. It's good to see that this. You know what? Maybe we should just feel a little bit.
It's what it is.
Maybe we should feel a little bit warm this morning. That the angle that the British media are picking before tomorrow night is about Rice and Grealish.
It's a little pat in the head for us for taking those players and minding them so gently through those difficult teenage years and exposing them to international football and what the camp was like way in advance of what they would have got within. Well done. You're a brilliant feeder nursery for us.
Don't know, like I definitely
Attaboy. Well done.
My confidence is certainly being helped by this experience that we've...
And then we brought them back to the mainland. Isn't that what the Athletic is saying, essentially?
Yeah, that's the headline. That would be a better headline, and then we brought them back to the mainland.
7:43 this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, you feel free. 087 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, you can always get us on the YouTube comments or on Twitter at Off The Ball. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. I want to tell you what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. We're going to join Daniel Harris in a couple of minutes' time. We've got the sports pages at 8:05. The Antrim football manager, Enda McGinley, is going to join us at 8:20 to look back on their very brief championship season, but a brilliant year for them in terms of league campaign. Cian Tracey is going to talk to us about Ireland and the Lions. We've got Jenny Claffey talking about the tennis at 8:50. The power rankings are coming your way at 9:10, and we've got rugby reaction last night from Niamh Briggs and Keith Wood as well at 9:30. In the meantime, very quickly, what do you make of the World Cup every 2 years?
Bad idea. Bad idea. I like the Euros. Like, I mean, is Wenger suggesting that we get rid of the Euros or move that to kind of a different year so that you've got a tournament 3 out of every 4 years? I think that's too much. Every second year is perfect. Euros, World Cup, every second year does it for me.
Wenger has proposed a month-long international break in October for nations to condense the entire qualifying campaign. So basically, you play all of your qualifiers 1 month in October. I guess it must be every year, is it? because you're qualifying for the next year's. So it's every second year. And I'm just trying to find how. There's no mention of the Euros.
The condensing of the qualifiers is probably something that's going to happen eventually, isn't it? And maybe putting more weight on the Nations League in terms of qualification spots rather than through the qualification period, because it's countries like France and England who are sick of playing minnows. We're still getting joy out of playing Gibraltar because we're still not 100% sure that those lead to 3 points necessarily, but elsewhere they're very top tier are just sick of playing the likes of those teams. They're probably even sick of the side of the likes of the Republic of Ireland even, and playing those teams. They want to be playing each other and they want those to be limited into as little time as possible. So I can see why Wenger is calling for it, and it might actually lead to a better overall international football product. I'm not sure how well it'll actually serve some of the smaller countries though, but maybe that's not Wenger's gig.
He's talking about moving the Euros to the in-between year, so there'll be 2027, 2026 World Cup in America, Canada, Mexico, 2027 European Championships, and then another World Cup in 28.
I could see if you're, I can see why he might be suggesting it, that he thinks that there is just all this downtime and too much time spent with meaningless games, because they are meaningless for a lot of the top tiers. I still think that what's kind of rare is wonderful with a few of these things, and every 4 years there's a beauty to that with the World Cup. And also, I know that he's talking about putting a lot of these games in the middle of the season rather than in the off-season as such, but the off-season is kind of important, and I think that we're starting to realise that, and it's not just in football at the moment, but actual time for players to recuperate is necessary. How many weeks are we away from the start of the Premier League? Is it 5 weeks?
Yeah.
That's...
He's saying there will be 4 weeks guaranteed rest for players at the end of any tournament in the new calendar. But look, I'm not sure that Arsene Wenger's standing in world football is what it was 15 years ago. So let's wait and see. 7:47 this morning. I'm delighted to say Daniel Harris is with us. Daniel, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm sure you think the idea of a World Cup every 2 years is a spiffing idea.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. You see it with all different kinds of football, and ultimately with all things that people like. Someone realises they can make a buck out of it, so they just try and do it more and more and more and more often on the basis that people will just lap it up every single time. They did it with Coronation Street and EastEnders. It used to be on twice a week, then it was 3 times a week, then it was 5 times a week. They do it with Marvel films, they do it with music, they do it with everything that they think will make a buck. But obviously what people don't realise is that, or maybe they do realise and think that it will still make them a buck, even though is that scarcity is what makes things lovable also, that you look forward to things, that what makes them special is the fact that they don't happen very often.
Yeah, it's a relatively simple thing to understand, is that absence makes the heart grow fonder. The fact that World Cups every 4 years means there's so much time and energy invested in them. The fact that everybody doesn't qualify. The reason the Italians are such a great story this time is because they're making a comeback from some national shame, and it's been a very important part of all of the big countries, I think with the exception of Germany, where there has been some catastrophe befalls them, sporting catastrophe, in a qualifying campaign, and it leads to bloodletting, and that's always a really interesting little extra part of the soap opera. If everybody always qualifies, then I don't know. Maybe in 5 years' time, this will happen, and we're like, hey, tournament football, it's what we all love.
Well, that's exactly what will happen. We'll be sitting here discussing who we think is going to win it and what we think is going to happen and what the big stories are, because that's what sport and football create, and we enjoy them, and we're mandated to cover the stuff because it's happening. But we'll see it with the Euros as well. The first Euros I remember, Euro 88, was 2 teams of 4 groups. And look at it now, whereas now we've got 24 teams, and basically that isn't enough because it leads to an unfair system. I think that what we'll see next time is we'll see it go up to 8 groups of 4, so 32 teams, and that will mean that pretty much everyone qualifies, but taking the shine away from the qualifying tournament, such as it is, and just meaning that basically everyone gets there in the end, will give us a fairer tournament, and it will probably be decided that one is worth sacrificing for the other. But that's the way that it's going, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and like that's where this conversation is coming from Wenger. And I like it's just an interesting time given the power struggle at the moment between the clubs and UEFA and FIFA, and this would be another way for UEFA and FIFA to further stake out territory and to ring fence. We're going to have access to these players, and there's nothing you can do about it right now because you're at your weakest in terms of political power.
Yeah, and I think what we'll also see a Club World Cup coming soon. I remember writing about that probably 15 years ago now, that I thought the Club World Cup, I couldn't believe it hadn't happened yet. And that seemed to me like a good idea. And I think that actually that still is a good idea, except if you think about the amount of money that would generate and where that money is going to end up, it would, unless they redistribute the wealth properly, it won't have a positive effect on national leagues, because the clubs that qualify will just make so much money that they'll then be able to outspend the clubs that they're already outspending by even greater factors, and that will then distort the wages and transfer fees. So that actually, I mean, yeah, as I said, as an idea, the idea of watching that, I'm not sure also the other thing with something like that is how do you decide who qualifies over a period of time? And do I trust the authorities that will be arranging such a thing to make sure that qualification is something that is earned, or is it just going to be all the richest clubs all the time and then one or two others? But if they work out a good qualifying system and they don't allow the clubs to harvest all the wealth, and those are two tremendous ifs, and we know what will actually happen to them. But if that happens, then I think a Club World Cup would be incredible. But it's the only way of doing it would make the ramifications absolutely dreadful. So it's best left, but I don't think it will be left for much longer.
So you don't count Manchester United's Club World Cup in 2008 as a proper trophy then?
Oh my gosh, I wish I'd have had the money to go to that. No, oh, sorry, you said 2008. I thought for a second you're talking about the one in 99-2000 where they went to Brazil. And those are some of my most regretted missed games, but I just have run out of money after the treble season. The one in 2008, I mean, it's not a Club World Cup. I mean, you call it, it's nice to be champions of planet Earth. And I think that United fans always, I mean, the players didn't really care about it. I don't think Fergie cared about it that much either. But I felt like as a supporter, it was always worth winning. I think partly, probably, if I'm honest, one of the reasons was because Liverpool never won it in the 70s or the 80s. And it felt like United at that point had been the only British team, only English team, and maybe the only British team as well to be champions of planet Earth. Obviously, that's no longer the case because Liverpool did it subsequently, although they weren't league champions at the time. But it's not the same as playing a couple of games against the champions of Asia and the champions of South America is not the same as kind of a four-group tournament of the teams that have been the best over a 4-year period, and it takes 3 weeks and you kind of go and bowl around as though you're watching your country in a World Cup, you're watching your club in a World Cup. So it's not quite the same as that, no. I mean, I was pleased when United were champions of planet Earth in 99-2000 and in 2008, but in terms of, if you think about how much money whoever earned the right to that Club World Cup would make, and just how big it would be, because you'd have, let's say you had 16 clubs all in the same place at the same time for an amount of time, I mean, it's colossal. And what we've had until that point isn't that. And I don't think it will be too long before that is a feature of one summer in every 4, or even one summer in every 2.
Okay, I want to play you this clip. It is Damien Delaney talking about the quality of Southgate and a little bit about just how good this team is at the moment. Have a look.
Is it possible that Gareth Southgate's a genius?
Oh, listen, I think I've had a discussion with you lads. I think he has something, yeah, really. I mean, that Germany game was such a huge risk, colossal risk, to pick 7 defenders and just almost kind of hope that they keep Germany at bay and go on and win the game. But look, he seems to have a handle on this team. He seems to have a way of analysing opposition, and he's utilising everything at his disposal, whether it's 3 at the back, all formations and different types of players. Obviously, if he gets it wrong and, he picks a team against Denmark and he, they're obviously baying for certain players to be in the team, and he kind of withstood that in the group stage. But if he doesn't start certain players and they lose, I don't think he'll be able to set foot in England again. That is the fine line between genius and lunatic.
Yeah, I mean, there's merit in asking the question, where is Southgate at the moment? Like, he gets criticised for not knowing his best team at the start of the tournament, and then turns that into a strength by actually being incredibly flexible. The type of flexibility that we would have traditionally associated with, you know, some of the greatest minds in world football, and he can't really get no love for that.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing a really good job. I mean, I said this before, that he said before the Croatia game, he said something that I thought was quite wise, that England could win and it wouldn't mean he'd got the team right, and England could lose and it wouldn't mean he necessarily got the team wrong. And I think that's fair. So the team that Damon was talking about against Germany, I don't think he particularly picked the right team for Germany. He got results, so it doesn't matter in the end. But England's superiority over Germany, I think, in terms of the players that they have, how settled they are, their youth, their pace, their power, their skill, was a lot more significant than 2 goals in the last 15 minutes. And when you're watching it on the telly, the commentary are like, this is slow, this is turgid, this is dull, this is a terrible game, neither team's playing well on 70 minutes. And on 90 minutes, you're getting, heroes to a man, what a performance. And then you've got Southgate saying, my team were immense. I don't think that's right. I don't think England played well against Germany. I don't think the team he picked gave him the best route to beating Germany. And had Müller not missed the kind of one-on-one that you never see Thomas Müller miss, England might have drawn or lost that game. But it went for him. And that's important. Things are just going for him at the moment. Against Ukraine, I think he got the team spot on. And I think the team played really well. It was admittedly against Ukraine, and I do think that is important, that where would Ukraine finish if they're in the Premier League? Top half, maybe, probably not. And that's the standard of the team. They absolutely rinsed, but they absolutely rinsed them playing with confidence and verve and enterprise. Now, if England go and play like the same way like that, the same players against Denmark, they'll almost definitely be in the final. And then they'll have a hard game. I mean, against Italy or Spain. I mean, I think as a football supporter, I mean, I don't support England, so as a football supporter, I hope it's Italy, because I think when you watch these tournaments, what you want is you want the best team to win. It is nice every now and again when you get a surprise win like Denmark in 1992, but ultimately, in theory, what is the point of this tournament is to tell us who the best team in Europe is. Spain are not the best team in Europe. So I kind of feel like I don't want Spain to somehow finagle the way of winning it. And they are capable of doing that because they're playing quite well. They're just finishing dreadfully. If they finish merely sensibly against Switzerland, they'd have won really easily. And if they play like that against Italy and someone happens to have a good day in front of goal, there's a good chance that they'll win. But I would say that I'm certain that England would rather play Spain than Italy, because Italy just look like an absolutely brutal to play against, if nothing else. Like, they'll run all night, they'll press all night, and they're incredibly organised. And I don't think England quite have that level of synchronisation and organisation. They do have better individuals than Italy, though, but I guess they've got to beat Denmark first. And I think that I'd be relatively surprised if Gareth Southgate made too many changes. I mean, I'm sure he'll be thinking about going to 3 at the back, but it's Denmark, not Germany. And Denmark are riding a wave. They're playing well, but I think that England should feel comfortable that they can go into a game against Denmark and pick what they think is their best team, not pick a team that is also focused on stopping Denmark. Because in midfield, the 3 players that they have, Mount, Rice and Phillips, it should be enough to have more of the ball than Denmark. And I think that they're more likely to need to stretch the play than they are to clutter up the play. So I think it'll probably be the same team, because I felt like Jadon Sancho wasn't brilliant against Denmark, because that's sort of been the rotating position, the right wing position. But I felt like he played better than Bukayo Saka did in either of the 2 games that he played. So, and I think that Denmark are more likely to sit back, so England will probably want someone like Sancho who can speed up the play and who will commit defenders. But if you pick Saka, Saka's also a brilliant player, so you'd understand that, just as you understand it if you pick Foden.
Yeah.
But I think the rest of the team is pretty much set.
I think he's going to pick Phil Foden. I have a feeling that he was kind of resting him after he got booked to make sure that he was going to be available for this game and then the final. So,
you couldn't argue with it if he did. Foden's an amazing player.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's not quite knowing what the best England team is at the moment. What is your relationship like with this team then, as not an England supporter per se, but they seem like from the outside like about the best of a representation that you could hope for as a national side, as individual men and as a group, a collective team. The things that they've done, the soundings from the camp, you know, as a group goes, this is about the most likeable England English football team I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said on Twitter the other day that we're talking about it, and I was saying that I'm not an England fan, but I never thought I'd say this, but I'm buzzing for the players because I like lots of them individually, and as a unit, I absolutely love what they represent. They represent so much of what should be good about England as a country that is not good. They're the antidote to the government. They're the antidote to the culture wars. They are not afraid to speak their mind and stand up for what is important. Like Jordan Henderson, Marcus Rashford have spent lots of time and lots of money giving people food to eat. Like Jordan Henderson just yesterday was standing up for the rights of the LGBTQ community. You've got Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford, Tyrone Mings fighting racism. And they just seem like a great bunch of lads. And there's also that thing when you watch a football team that when they're enjoying it, when they're enjoying each other's company, because ultimately they're doing what we all love to be doing. And when you used to see the old England teams, they felt like they hated it. Like it was also important and also on top of them and also miserable and also pressurised and also serious. And this lot aren't like that. Obviously they want to win and they're taking the football seriously, but they're having the time of their lives. And that sentiment and that sensation is contagious. Like we all know what it's like to hang out with your mates and go on a holiday with your mates and spend time with them. And we all love doing it. And a lot of us, when we get into that state of life, when that's not available to us very often, we reminisce about it or we try and carve out time to get to do it because they're formative and important times that we then feel nostalgia and love towards afterwards. And we can see these lads doing exactly that right now. And even though we don't understand what it's like to compete in high-level sport, we understand what a lot of the peripherals are like. And so we identify with them. And they also are standing up for what's right and taking on the government whilst taking on Europe in the meantime. And that is a heady and infectious mix. So, yeah, I absolutely love this team.
Yeah, I can see why. Daniel, let's briefly talk about the Manchester United situation. The Sancho deal obviously has been apparently two and a half years in the making and is finally over the line, at least we think. What difference will he make to the team? How does he improve the team?
Well, he immediately gives you a threat, like in a position you didn't have one. United have basically played without a right winger for years and years now. And I guess since, I can't even remember who the last full-time one was, probably Nani. And that was a long time ago. So what you get is you immediately have a threat on the other side of the pitch. A team can no longer focus, when they're playing United, they can no longer focus their defending on United's left flank and leave Wan-Bissaka on the ball, leave whoever plays on the right on the ball. If it's Daniel James, he doesn't really want to attack down the outside. He wants to play on the left. If it's Mason Greenwood, he wants to attack the box. Well, not anymore. They've now got a proper winger who can go on the outside down the right. And what that also means is you can't be leaving Wan-Bissaka on the ball because he can give it to Sancho. But also, for the last 2 seasons, Wan-Bissaka has been a one-man right flank. And that's no longer the case. And people have said that Wan-Bissaka can't attack, can't go forward. But one of the reasons people say that is because he hasn't had any help. Luke Shaw is obviously a better attacker than Wan-Bissaka, but he's also got Marcus Rashford outside him. It makes a massive difference. I think one of the other things is that it means United have struggled with balance for years because they don't really want to play Fred and McTominay. But if you play Bruno Fernandes and Paul Pogba, two high-risk, high-reward players who aren't going to do as much running, then that can leave you unbalanced. But with Sancho's not just a winger, he's a playmaker. He's looking to prompt, he's looking to move the ball, he's looking to move across the pitch, he's looking to come deep, he's looking to go through the middle. And that means that you don't need Paul Pogba as much because you've also got another creator, so that if a team decide they want to double up on Bruno Fernandes, then there's leaving space for Jadon Sancho. And so that gives you an option of, if you were to lose Paul Pogba, what you would lose by losing Paul Pogba is not the same now that you have another playmaker. And I think what it also gives you is next season through the middle, it'll be Cavani a lot of the time. But when Cavani moves on the year after that, and you probably have a front three of Rashford, Greenwood, Sancho, you're looking at something a little bit similar to Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez, in that all three players can play in all three attacking positions and turn up anywhere. They're all quick, they're young, they're adaptable, and that will give you a pretty serious front three as well. And also the way that you're going to play will make it difficult for the opponents because you've no idea who's going to turn up where. So I didn't think that right wing was United's biggest concern because I felt that Mason Greenwood could give you enough there so that he'd be a good enough workaround and has been one already. So there are other areas of the pitch that you needed to strengthen. But I'm absolutely sure that teams trying to defend the width of the pitch against United are going to find that they don't have quite enough duvet to cover their feet.
So that front three of Rashford, Greenwood and now Sancho will play in front of a midfield three of Pogba, Bruno and McTominay?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Pogba left this summer. And I feel that because they've got Sancho, United are now in a better position to let him go. I think that if they get an offer that they think is all right, I think they'll take that because they won't want him to go next summer for free. They won't want the whole, is he going, is he not, every 5 minutes. That is probably quite unsettling for the player, for the manager, for the rest of the team. So I think that if Pogba goes, if Pogba wants to go and they get a good offer, I think they'll allow him to go. And then they would replace him with a slightly different player, I think. If you replaced Pogba with a player who gave you more running and more involvement in the game, then I think that you might end up with a better team. But if you get to keep Paul Pogba, obviously Paul Pogba's an amazing player, so that's also an acceptable state of affairs.
And the other two, the French-related transfers, Raphael Varane, there's definitely noise this is more likely to happen than not. And Eduardo Camavinga is the other one that there's talk about. What do you know about Varane and Camavinga?
Varane, I was told, was good chance of that happening probably about 4 weeks ago now. And I think that'll happen because there doesn't seem to be very much reason for that not to happen. As from Madrid's perspective, they can't afford to lose him for free and he wants to leave. So they'll take whatever money they can get. There doesn't seem to be anyone else competing. And United, I was told, is where he wants to go. So then it just becomes a matter of his personal terms. Seems unlikely in the end that they're not going to be able to find a sum enormous enough that he would take, but small enough that United are happy to pay it. And the transfer fee is, when the transfer fee seems so low, what are they going to end up haggling over? Whether it's 50 million euros or 60 million euros for. And the thing with Varane is, however good or bad he would be if he turned up, he's going to be better than Victor Lindelof. And so you know that he's going to be better than what you've got already. So I think there's a good chance that transfer happens. I mean, I was told a few days ago that it wasn't that far along yet, but I do think that one will happen. Camavinga, I don't know anything about. But again, it sort of fits United's bill because he's a player who's available for free next summer, which means the selling club probably feel that they've got to sell. And there doesn't seem to be anyone else who's immediately interested. And he's a young player of the sort that United like to buy, who they probably feel is a blue chip talent. You can't fail with that guy because they know that he's great. And there's a lot of people who seem to have suddenly acquired season tickets to Rennes over the last couple of weeks. I'm not one of them. I've seen Camavinga play once, I think, and I think he's a good player. But people that have seen him play more often think that he could be a world-beating player. So again, there doesn't seem to be that much reason for that deal not to happen, but I don't have any information about it, so I have no idea whether or not it will happen. I just read actually this morning that Julien Laurent was saying that they're looking at including Donny van der Beek in the transfer on loan for Varane, incidentally, which would be another deal that probably another way of helping that deal work out well for both parties. But back to Camavinga, if Van der Beek went as well, that sort of leaves you some space for Camavinga. And with Camavinga, what you get someone who could be the number 6 that you might want. But it seems like most people think that if you limit Camavinga's running, then you sort of limit him as well, even though he could be good enough to play that role. So if you were to sell Pogba, then you might replace him with Camavinga for roughly the same money that you sold Pogba for, and then with the money that you save on wages, or with your transfer budget, then you could also buy number 6. I'm not sure, but both those signings seem extremely feasible. But Varane, I would say, I have been told that Varane wants to come to United, and it just seems that the money's not going to be prohibitive. So I think Varane will happen. Camavinga, you have to listen to other people that say they know what's going on because I'm not one of those. But
right.
it seems likely.
Daniel, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
All right, see you again, lads. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good day.
You too. Daniel Harris giving us some thoughts there on the England scenario and, of course, the latest situation with Manchester United. Will have to bring back a deal or no deal fairly soon, given the amount of transfers that it seems are imminent and that will be wrapped up immediately after the Euros. There's going to be a slew of deals done as teams go out and agents get stuff done before the short break, and then pre-season starts, and then there'll be another slew of deals just before the transfer window closes. So we should be entering a busy period for that. It's 10 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. Very busy show still to come, including the always correct power rankings from Eoin a little bit later on. We're going to hear from Enda McGinley in just a moment, and the papers are next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Dad Pod.
This is a video thing as well.
Doesn't have a name.
Podcast.
Midlife crisis.
Paddy Daddy.
Midlife crisis.
Dadcast.
That's not bad, actually. Yeah.
There was definitely a period of a couple of months where meltdowns were becoming more frequent, and now when she's outside and she's sort of playing with the neighbours' kids, like if she doesn't get her own way, the meltdown is quite extreme. So maybe that's the terrible twos, but I think maybe we've escaped the worst of it.
Well, I think the terrible twos is a bit of a misnomer because it goes into the 3s and 4s.
Dadcast, Tuesdays from 3 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in on the OTB Sports app.
Car insurance is boring, but you don't have to be. Get Set Go is the kind of car insurance you can sort in a few minutes online, then bounce on with your day. Are you ready for quick start insurance? Get a quote now at getsetgo.ie. MCL Insurance Services Ireland Limited, trading as getsetgo.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
First up, a Go Loud original from News Talk.
Get all the news you need to start your day with First Up, the podcast that brings you stories, analysis and interviews with the top newsmakers. First Up, available each weekday morning from 7 a.m. on Go Loud.
Subscribe to this podcast for free on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
12 minutes past 8 this morning, we can bring you the front pages of the newspapers. We can start with OTBSports.com. NHL goalkeeper Matthias Kivlenkis dies in firework hot tub incident. The one time that Juan Sebastian Veron saw Lionel Messi truly scared. A former dub star thinks it's unlikely we'll see Stephen Cluxton this summer. It's Paddy Andrews. And Federer cruises into Wimbledon quarter-finals as Manic Monday draws to a close. And Billy Gilmore's mum aims dig at Celtic during Norwich unveiling. Right, what's going on there? I missed that. The Indo. Back page. Cynicism rule rushed into place, says Kelly. This is Barry Kelly, the former inter-county referee, who has come to the defence of under fire James Owens, Michael Verney's story. There's the Laois minor hurling captain from 57 years ago finally gets his hands on the Leinster trophy that they won, the Walter Hanrahan Cup last Saturday. And then Cavan Club breaks new ground with sale of naming rights. Donegal Boyle has this story. A Cavan club has broken new ground in the GA by selling the naming rights to their club grounds. Gowna have sold their club, their grounds naming rights to Club Spot Park. There you go. Only in Cavan.
Yeah, the first club in Ireland, I think, to ever do that. Brave new world.
Yeah, everybody's still talking about Cluxton. The London Times back page, joy for clubs as capacity crowds return, and there's also sad end to Raducanu's Wimbledon dream. She's on the front of the London Times there as well, holding her stomach. There seems to have been some breathing difficulties that caused her to withdraw. The exact nature of what it was has yet to be revealed. The Guardian back page, same headline, same picture. Raducanu illness forces her shock exit, although she was 3-love down in the second set, and down a set, so it looked like she was going out anyway. Springboks in isolation. Lions tour thrown into fresh doubt after new positive test. Every single test that is positive for the Springboks will lead to doubts being cast about the Lions tour. We must grab chance to play in home final, says Kane. It's at home. They can't screw this up, can they?
It's a massive advantage, and I think that the Germany game proved that. We weren't sure whether or not they'd be affected in a negative way, if there'd be some level of performance anxiety, but I think that the win over Germany probably dispelled that a little bit. The one thing is, what happens if they go 1-0 down in any of these two games? What then happens to that Wembley crowd? Because, as we discussed earlier on with Daniel Harris, there is a very thin line between Gareth Southgate being a genius and Gareth Southgate being blamed for England if Thomas Muller equalises and, I don't know, England losing penalties, for example. Like, the truth is that it wouldn't necessarily be his fault, or it's not necessarily all to his credit if they are playing so well. Like, his role will always be overemphasised, and I just wonder what would happen if they do concede, and if there is a little bit of a negative feeling around them. Maybe they'll be totally fine. Maybe the mental fortitude is there. Like, it'll be maybe half the team that played the World Cup semi-final will play tomorrow night, maybe 6 of the same starters. So I think that's a pretty good reservoir of experience.
Keep calm and Harry on at the back page of the Sun. Kane, don't blow home advantage. And then they've got a story. It looks like it might be an exclusive. I haven't seen it anywhere else. Maybe apologies if it isn't. But Owen Cowser has a story that Robbie Keane is on the managerial shortlist for A-League outfit Western United, the Australian club based just outside Melbourne, finished third from bottom last season. And Robbie Keane is on the shortlist for that. Maguire, I'll repay boss after Greece. That whole Harry Maguire story seems to have disappeared. Front page headline, Yacht baby. Did you get it? It's the U2 stage manager who was rescued after 52 days lost at sea.
Wow.
The Mirror back page is now or never. Ericsson, hell drives Danes is the one on that one. Give him a break is the Cluxton thing. Bernard Brogan admits All-Ireland winner Stephen Cluxton deserves a break from the inter-county scene and says he has reservations about whether the goalkeeper will return. It's unlikely he's going to return, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, what's to give it a break in relation to? I think everybody's kind of quite accepting that he's taking a break, and is somebody, I'm not sure, I haven't seen anybody say that he can't take some time out from Gaelic football. I'm not sure, maybe I missed something.
No, it's give him time to make his decision up there.
I think everybody's kind of said it. I know that there's been, like, on the Sunday game on Sunday night, obviously, Tomas O'Shea and Colm O'Rourke, I think I've got a bit of blowback for their comments on Cluxton of Day when they were saying that maybe he should have informed Izzy Farrell more. Like, you can criticise that all you want, but they're not saying that he can't take a break. Maybe I misread it, but I don't know. It's like, is that hitting back at criticism that doesn't necessarily exist? I think everybody knows that Stephen Cluxton has every right to step away from it.
Yeah, but I think that people also are making the point that it's got a bit messy. If you're the manager, you want to know whether or not your player's going to play. It's just that you can't order him to tell you, you know?
Yeah.
Because then it will be messy at the end as opposed to it being very straightforward. The front page of the Star, a very interesting story here. Life's a picnic on the run. That the picnicker is Anthony Stokes. Soccer star Anthony Stokes on day out in Dublin despite being wanted in Scotland for sending abusive messages to dad of ex-Eiley Scott. And then they go on and they have more pictures of him in Marley Park having a picnic. Silence on the lam. He refuses to answer questions while they're saying he is on the lam. Stokes dodges questions over arrest warrant as he openly enjoys day in the park here despite being wanted in the UK. So was he training with the Legal Ireland club last week? I'm not sure. The Irish Daily Star back page is Denemies, familiar foe, Denmark defender Andreas Christensen. It's horses for courses for Lowry. That's Shane Lowry with Istabrack during the week. And the Irish Daily Mail, groundswell, fans numbers to rise as Dubs back at Croker. As you made the point, the first time they've been at Croker all year.
Yeah, I think this is a massive factor. I really think that we've kind of overlooked this a little bit, that I've been one of the people who've said it, that they haven't been as good as they have in previous years, but really I think we all, and myself included, need to realise that they haven't played in Croke Park all year. Let's wait to start actually saying we're worried about the Dubs or we're worried about them not hammering teams until we see them playing Croke Park. And I think Meath, I'm not sure is there anything you can do, but if you're Meath, you possibly could be fighting tooth and nail for that game to have not been played in Croke Park on Sunday week, because that fixture I don't think was confirmed until yesterday. I don't think it was confirmed that the Leinster semi-finals were going to be played at headquarters until yesterday, so it was up in the air as far as I'm aware. Could Meath have said we want this game in Portlaoise or Newbridge or nowhere or anywhere really? Like, just don't play this game in Croke Park because it is their home ground. It is the place where they have their ability to kill a team. The know-how they have in that stadium is just incredible, and it is worth a few points.
A relatively empty hill, presumably. Maybe an entirely empty hill.
But I think what we've seen, like, over the last little while, is that it does matter. Of course, it would be better if there was 82,000 people in there for the sake of Dublin. But even just the existence of some volume, even just their knowledge of the stadium, the dimensions of the pitch, shooting into the goals, all that stuff counts, and that goes for every team. Like even when we were previewing Kerry Clare a few weeks ago, we knew that would be more likely to be a destruction of Clare because the game wasn't in Cusack Park and it was instead played in Killarney for both those reasons, that the home comforts that Clare were missing and the home comfort that the opposition were gaining. And the same goes for Meath against Dublin on Sunday week. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think that is a factor that's now leading me to believe that actually we're not going to get this Meath-Dublin competitive match that we were hoping for yesterday.
On the basis of the venue alone?
It's just kind of pushing me that way. It's kind of like we've come to the conclusion that maybe the Dubs ain't what they once were, but the Dubs also haven't had the venue that they've always had all year as well, which I think in an overall sense is a big deal, and I think it will be a big deal against Meath.
All right, 20 minutes past 8. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. It is with Gaelic Games that we're staying, and I'm delighted to say Enda McGinley is with us this morning. Enda, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm fine. Back to work now today. I had a day off yesterday, so back to Parry today.
Right. Well, how has the whole thing been for you? What was the experience of being in the Championship as an inter-county manager actually like?
Yeah, to be honest, I found it sort of the day or two prior to it, I suddenly realised that I was standing on the sideline of an Ulster Championship game. That sounds daft, but you're sort of so caught up in just the day-to-day runnings of the team that you sort of forget that where you are going to stand. And for us up here, Ulster Championship, whilst it maybe hasn't lived up to its billing this year so far, it's still a significant place to be, and a significant pressure point, I suppose, on the managers. So yeah, there was certainly a bit of pressure being felt. There's no doubt about that. But I just kept reminding myself, look, it's about the players. It's the players' day. It's the players' performance, and the manager. While you take a lot of pressure on yourself, it's really about the men on the pitch.
Obviously the results didn't go your way, but it sounds like certainly for 40-45 minutes the performance was excellent.
Yeah, frustratingly so. On the one hand, we're getting plaudits for how we played, and yet bottom line, the cold facts are we got beat by 13 points, which we certainly didn't intend to when we went out. I haven't managed to sit down and watch the whole match yet. But I have seen the 4 goals, and each of them were matters of inches or just ever so slightly defenders being in the wrong position, and one was just a basic mistake, and yet those 4 wee things got 4 goals. So you have to credit Armagh with that, and again that's what top level forwards will do, and that's our defenders would learn massively when they're exposed to coming up against those top level forwards, and that's the only way you do develop. So there was harsh lessons to be learned, but in terms of how we went about our business and the effort of the lads, which only really reflected what they'd done earlier in the year and what they've been doing on the training pitch, I was delighted for them that they put in a performance that in many ways they can be proud of, but at the same stage we can't be caught sort of giving ourselves a pat on the back after a 13-point defeat. We have to accept that there's lessons to be learned and there's challenges ahead, and use that to drive on. But certainly there was more comfort than you would expect to have normally coming from a 13-point defeat.
Yeah, and look, I suppose that's why, while the Championship is the thing that brings the pressure and it's so redolent, particularly for somebody who's been involved in massive Ulster Championship games as you were as a player, the most important thing this year from most counties' perspective was the league. And so now with the season finished, how do you assess how the league went?
The league for us was essentially a job done. It was exceptionally competitive. Like, we were in a northern section with Sligo under Tony McEntee, Leitrim under Terry Hyland, Mickey Hart over Louth, obviously. So it was an exceptionally tough section, and we rode our luck at times to come out of games, although in saying that, we probably should have won some of them games by a wee bit more than what we did. So, but we were scrambling, like, as a new management team, not unlike Mickey and Tony McEntee. You were scrambling to try and form a team. You'd only had 4 or 5 weeks of preparation. You were trying to see some boys in certain positions. You were trying to get fellas with games in the legs. And you were dealing with injuries as well. So it was an exceptionally strange time, but we thankfully came through it on the right side, and then we finished it out against Waterford in the semi-final. So the promotion, as you say, absolutely, that's a progression. Getting up to Division 3 next year is the stepping stone that starts to expose us to a better quality of player or a better setup of team, and try and face those challenges and develop. So that is always a development point. But look, we're all creatures of habit. Championship is championship. You still wanted to do something, and whilst it'll sound daft to everybody outside it, I've always said within a county team, you are literally living within a bubble. And within that bubble, we honestly did believe that we could cause Armagh significant problems. We just knew we had to have things going our way. So at this stage, the league is there as a comfort to fall back on and as something to build on next year, but you're still hurting after the defeat.
Was your sense that Division 4 was just an underachievement from Antrim in the first place anyway?
Pardon?
Was your sense that they were, I guess, underachieving by being in Division 4 in the first place?
I think every team in Division 4 thinks that they're underachieving by being there, but the one thing I would say that's different maybe that come from football compared to hurling, I think pretty much every county, certainly you're counting 30 odd counties, will have 20, 30, maybe 40 football clubs within their county. And so if you're taking 15, 20 players in every one of them clubs, every county can put out a team of very decent footballers. Hurling in the weaker counties, there's maybe only several clubs that they're picking from. And so the line to try and make your county squad is lower in the so-called weaker hurling counties than it is in football counties, where there's still a big clutch of players available for managers to pick from. And so you should always be able to put out a pretty solid football side, and then it's about getting it organised. The biggest thing for the smaller counties is getting everybody on the pitch that you want on the pitch, and because there's less for them teams to play for, there's less to appeal to those players to put in the sacrifices that are needed. Often those counties aren't getting out their best teams onto the pitch, and often a few years of that can end up with you stuck in Division 4. But it's an exceptionally difficult place to get out of. The teams that do emerge from it are relieved and want to stay the hell away from it because it's so difficult. Next year, you've got Tipperary and Cavan down there too. So the nature of the football side of things is that whilst we sort of think the lowest division, that's just a scrap down there, in football, actually, it is still really, really competitive. And I'm not so sure, now maybe we'll learn our lesson next year, but I'm not so sure there's massive differences between 4 and 3, and similarly between the upper end of 3 and 2. And I think that's why you can see teams like Cavan and like Tipperary go from 1, 2, 3 and 4, go down the hill, and they're not the first teams to have done that. So in football, I do think it's a wee bit different, but it's still a harsh place to be in Division 4, where Antrim underperforming there. I think they would certainly believe they are, but the previous management teams were for 3 years running, I think they were within a point of promotion and just fallen short of that line. So it was brilliant to get that wee bit of luck and get over that line this year.
One of the things that we keep hearing about is the difficulty for the teams, particularly outside of Division 2 and below that, in getting the best players to commit to the lifestyle requirements to be an inter-county footballer. Is it going to be easier for you now that there is a little bit of momentum off the back of the league campaign, or is that still going to be an issue for you to convince players that the right thing to do is to identify in your sporting identity as an Antrim footballer?
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on. That is the crux of the problem. In terms of momentum, absolutely. Every wee bit of momentum helps. But there's still players that will be hurting that were around the fringes of the team. And for them players to recommit again, it is much easier for them to walk away. People keep talking about the difference in conditioning between Division 3 and 4 teams and Division 1 and 2 teams. That level of conditioning comes after you've been at that level for 3-4 years, and as a player you've been there for 3-4 years doing that conditioning year in, year out, pretty much 11 months of the year really. For the teams in 3 and 4, trying to get players to repeatedly do that, the obvious question is why would you repeatedly do that? The other thing is the way we fashion the season. Those teams routinely get 2 to 3 months less training, less conditioning work together as a team than the top teams. So it's no wonder that the gap has only ever increased, particularly as the sports science and the money has come into it more and the setups have become more professional. Those 2 or 3 months over several years and the ability to avoid high turnover levels is much more weighted towards the bigger teams, and so the gap only ever increases. And so I think those awareness of those factors has to come in to any discussion about a second tier thing. We have to realise that for me in professional sports, say soccer, getting children out onto the pitch, those children are dreaming, whether it's realistic or not for them. A huge part of it is the dream of playing in World Cups, European Championships, Premierships. They might play for their local team, but it's the dream of being able to do that because it's a professional setup and they can be bought and they can be transferred. Those dreams are all real. For players, children in so-called smaller counties, there is no dream of playing in an All-Ireland final for Dublin. So those dreams and the reality of that isn't there. The GAA is a different setup, we know that, but we're very much putting our eggs in the elite team basket at the minute. Like, their plans for the Tailteann Cup and some of those proposals were insulting. They held nothing of appeal to players, bar some crumbs of being seen by the authorities of giving some extra games to those teams. In no way was the profile of the finals being catered for. In no way was things like prize money, which should be equal between competitions, being catered for. Like, just across the board, it was second class of competition, a lower tier. Essentially, get out of the way and stay happy with the crumbs that you're getting. And for me, that doesn't work. For a smaller county team to win, say, a Tailteann Cup takes every bit the same effort from those players as for Dublin and Kerry to win the All-Ireland. Like, for Dublin and Kerry to win the All-Ireland, this sounds daft, but it was the same for me whenever we were back in Tyrone. It was a relatively, you were within that top bunch. It was a relatively easy step to make to get up there. And All-Ireland's, when you have a good team and a good setup, they're there to be won. For other teams to try and win, say, the Tailteann Cup, that is every bit as much as challenge, and the GAA need to respect that and treat both absolutely equally. Why do we pay the top teams more in terms of league money and attendance money, so they can put more money into their setups, so the gap can increase, so that the lower teams go chasing this dream of keeping up with them? So we just need to be more realistic and accept the GAA is a completely different setup, and can set up their competitions to respect the differences between levels, to respect that people can't suddenly transfer to big teams where honours can be won, and to let the players at those so-called lower levels have something really to push for.
And that's all really interesting. And just one of the things that you mentioned there about the difference in the strength and conditioning done between teams of varying divisions. It's actually been mentioned in the Irish Times this morning by Kevin McStay, who points that out as well as one of the reasons for the inequality around the country. And he's actually suggesting that strength and conditioning could be centralised on a national level from an earlier age. Is that something that you would see to be helpful? Personally, I don't buy that at all. Right. Lifting weights, lifting 40 kg in Antrim is the exact same as a Dublin player lifting 40 kg in Dublin. Like, it's, I don't buy that at all. We have a phenomenal strength and conditioning setup, and the boys have made brilliant strides this year. And there is only so many, and it was interesting, one of our more senior players came to me after we had done 3 months of lockdown, and I could see what the fellas had done, and it was massive, and I could see the quality of the fella that we have in, Brenton Murphy, that was in leading that programme. It was superb. He's working with the hurlers too, and has done brilliant work with them too. And I could see the level was as good as any, and the boys were putting in as many sessions physically as their bodies were going to tolerate to keep making the gains, because you can't overwork your body, otherwise you stop making the gains. And yet I was chatting to one of the lads after sort of coming towards the end of lockdown. I said, like, that's a brilliant programme. We've really come on with that. And you can start seeing the differences in boys. And he says, aye, but you just know that the other teams are probably doing more. And that, it was just a mindset. It was literally just a mindset. Like, and I seen it, I suppose, from my Tyrone days. I could see that other teams thought that we were doing something extra special, that we were doing somehow, if you got looking behind the curtain, somehow there was this amazing thing that these boys were doing, and that was the difference. That's a load of rubbish for me. Like, for me, lifting weights is lifting weights, running is running, and all of them things is fine. It's about getting the best players on the pitch playing really well, not making mistakes, and being intelligent footballers on the pitch, and being exposed to continually high levels of football where the wee mistakes, the wee positioning things, the wee ability to break down better defences, them things are forced to get better and better and better. And that's where the big teams are. Of course, the mindset of sticking with the conditioning programme, like, you could have the best conditioning programme in the world, but if you're only doing it for 1 or 2 or 3 months, or 1 or 2 years, and then the player drops off and then another player comes in, there's absolutely no gain. It's them players have to be doing it for 8, 9, 10 months of the year, 3, 4 years, and then they're there. What teams are doing that? The top teams. So it's not some fancy conditioning programme. I don't buy that at all. It's the length of time the players are able to do it over a number of years, and then the exposure to top level football.
And the original sin is the structures. That's the problem. If you fix that, if you give the Antrim footballers and the Leitrim footballers a reason to stay interested and the opportunity to play for as long a season as everybody else, then they can begin to progress and measure themselves, and that all the rest of the stuff kind of falls into place once you get the structures right.
For me, it certainly improves things. And look, there will always and has always ever been a gap you can't have 32 teams all playing at the same level unless you make population equal in every county, so that every county has the exact same pick. And we're not going to be in that setup. So there will be stronger counties and there will be teams that are, I hate the term, but weaker counties. So structures has a part in that. But for me, we have to create something that it's as much of a joy and an appeal, and we can see that at club level. Like it is literally staring us in the face. Every county, every club, those junior clubs and intermediate clubs, they feel real value in their competitions and winning those competitions, and they can progress. And their people will have as much celebration, and the children will have as much joy talking out and aspiring to play for their club senior team at junior level as they will at senior level, because they'll have seen the joy of the celebrations within their people. When they go and win something, they'll see how them players are held and remembered, and that's the same at junior level or senior level. So for me, it's staring us in the face, but it will be a hard sell. Like, I'm speaking for me, coming from my point of view. I know those Antrim players, and they want the respect of having a go with Sam Maguire. They want to do them things. So the conversation has to be handled well. But the biggest thing is them teams have to be respected every bit as much as the Dublin and the Kerrys, and that's what we're getting wrong at the minute. We're treating this just lower tier teams, a wee second class thing, or give them a few extra games and basically get them away from the hammerings. Let's protect the poor wee children from getting the hammerings. That's how the conversation is at the minute, and it's not one that's been held with any degree of respect for the teams that are playing really hard, that are training every bit as hard, that are doing every bit as good as conditioning as the other teams when they've got the availability to do so. So I just don't like the way the conversation is being shaped at the minute, and I think we're not going at it the right way.
And is part of that conversation to do with this year's special congress, the proposals that are going to the table? Is that at least an attempt towards creating the right shape in your view?
I think so. There's one of them for me is absolutely a horrible thing. The Tailteann Cup, as I've said before, becomes a bit of a loser cup. And I think it was scheduled this year. It was to be occurring before the hurling semi-final. Obviously, a huge day in the football calendar for those lads to aspire to be a part of. So, to be honest, I don't think either proposed. Whenever I seen them, I just didn't get enough sense that they were really saying this is a big deal. Like, again, say going back to TV rights, rather than worrying are they getting 3 million or 4 million or 4 million or 4.5 million. Why don't they say to the TV company, right, well, we'll give you, if you're willing, that a third of your games are going to be shown the Tailteann Cup, or that we schedule the Tailteann Cup games for, say, a Friday evening, so that they've got their own evening on TV and their live coverage, and those players are getting a profile. Because again, we want to build the game in all these counties and have it really, really healthy. It's not that we have to build up Antrim, that someday Antrim can take on Dublin. If that ever comes to pass, well then so be it. But it's given real profile, real big days, real sense of joy, and real sense of potential proper respected success for those players to aspire to. And I think it's absent at the minute, and I'm not sure I'm seeing it massively in either of the plans, but certainly the one that has got the retention of the provincial championships and the Tailteann Cup is essentially a bottom 8 for just the very bottom teams to play off for, with no other knock-on effect and no benefit to their league position or anything. It's just an absolute disrespect, a joke of a proposal for me.
Is there an obvious fix, move the league to the summer and have that be the All-Ireland Championship and promotion and relegation, keep the 4 divisions, maybe the team who finishes top of Division 4 could get into a preliminary quarterfinals or something like that? That's
proposal B, really, isn't it?
Look, in terms of ideal, I'm giving out plenty this morning. I don't know, I think I'm still grumpy from the weekend, but in terms of ideal, I'm well aware there's no ideal thing. Like, that's why there's been no obvious thing. But I think just like for me, a simple thing in terms of the 4 divisions, I think actually shaping it to 3 divisions would be better, because one, there's a group of those Division 2 teams that mixing more often with the top teams will help them. Equally, having the top teams not always just playing against each other holds back their rate of progression too, just by mixing that a wee bit better, diluting the quality actually that they're constantly exposed to, because you're giving them an advantage. So you could go to 3 divisions, and I think that would also help the lower teams at their end as well. In terms of, for me, I'd love to head towards an All-Ireland type championship or an All-Ireland type weekend where the 2 big finals, if it's 2 competitions, or the 3 big finals were held on the one weekend, and it's a real festival at the end of the summer. And that way, the competitions, the lower level or the Tailteann Cup say teams, if that's the competition, they've had a full summer of work and they're heading towards that famous sort of All-Ireland weekend, and their supporters can look forward to that, and their players can look forward to that, and sort of things like equal prize money, things like that. There should be a number of all-stars if the players are playing at an appropriate level. There should be a number of all-stars within the actual all-star selection, because again, anybody that's played, we know that there's quality of players down there that are equal to the quality of players that are in the top teams. It's just they're rarely recognised. So things like all-stars, things like prize money, things like the occasions the players get to play on, things like the length of the competition that those players get to play on throughout the summer, all of them things are factors to making it to making it a real viable, for me, prospect.
Can I just ask you one last thing? You saying this morning now is going to spark a debate, because you are the manager of the Antrim senior football team. That is a position now that kind of lends extra power. Obviously, before that, you were a 3-time All-Ireland winner with Tyrone and a columnist and a pundit. But do you understand that now you have the power to kind of spark debate?
I'm not so sure about that. But the key thing is, I'm probably on a different page from those players, and the one thing, and it's really struck me and frustrated me, is that the effort and the dedication, the genuine nature that them players feel, and yet the very real perception and mindset of second-class citizens. And there's something wrong with that, because what them players done, what they done for their clubs and what they done for the county this year, and the dedication they showed and the sacrifices they made in their life, and you just were thinking, what is this for? Is it fair for me to be asking for more from these boys? Now, the vast majority of them are happy to do it, but even within their clubs and they're going back, and if it wasn't going well, what are they hearing? That she's way up there at all? That's a waste of time. She is only going to get hammered. And just for me, there was just a sense that this isn't right, and yet you could see the joy in them of being part of the big competition, to being part of that Ulster Championship, and they played to a different level. And I would go back to the performance, and if you could remove the goals for 1 second, if you just looked in at the game, I think those 2 teams were competing at a very similar type of football, and I'm delighted for the lads that they were able to show that they were doing that. But in the grander scheme of things, and looking right across all the teams at that level, I just think the structures aren't right. I know all the weight and all the momentum, because of the nature of the results, is behind splitting it. But for me, unfortunately, the conversation seems to be splitting it just to avoid those teams getting a hammering. So stick them down in and let them play at their own level. It's just, for me, that's a really disrespectful framework for a conversation to be had, and yet that seems to be the entire tone of the conversation. So if me saying that might make people think, I would doubt it, but if it does make people think, then great.
Well, I think the conversation started for sure, and brilliant stuff this morning. Commiserations on the defeat, but I think the body of work over the year, I think you can be pretty proud of your debut season as a manager, and thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, all the best.
It's Enda McGinley with some thought-provoking stuff there. We'd love to hear from you if you are from any of those counties who Enda McGinley is talking about. Maybe you don't self-identify as one of the so-called weaker counties, but either way, the debate has definitely started. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or of course you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. But it's really important, I think, that those managers who are at the coalface are heard and that they have their voices, because this isn't somebody who doesn't understand what he's talking about when he's talking about the commitment required to win All-Ireland. He has 3 of them from a county that had none before his team and his group arrived. So completely understands that bit where you have to build something and rip up what had gone previously. So, you know, a very articulate voice for what needs to happen and what's not really being represented at the moment in those conversations. So, I don't know.
Yeah, it is extremely thought-provoking stuff, because it does make you just check what you've been thinking about this for a long time. And for me anyway, when it comes to these, whatever tier you want to talk about, if it was the Tailteann Cup, for example, I definitely feel, and maybe I've kind of just through conversation of the show here, that we have framed it in the way of if you win the Tailteann Cup, then you'll be able to compete for Sam Maguire one day, and that is kind of patronising, isn't it? Like maybe we needed to reevaluate that a little bit, and actually, why can't the Tailteann Cup actually be an extremely important thing for the players who were competing in it? And maybe the proposal that was on the table, what we would have seen on the pitches of Ireland last summer if there was no pandemic, maybe actually would have been something that wouldn't have been very satisfying at all.
Like, are the players going to stick around? That's the look. There's two parts to this. There's the split season, and then there's what you use a lot of time for to get the most amount of games in, because that's what people want. So look, we'll come back to that because there's plenty of time for it. So a reminder, we're broadcasting all of the matches from the British and Irish Lions tour of South Africa on Off the Ball. It continued with Saturday's warm-up game against the Emirates Lions and continues this Wednesday with the game against the Cell C Sharks. Our coverage will be brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. Cian Tracey is with us this morning to talk to us about both the Lions and Ireland. Cian, good morning to you. We might start with Ireland, if that's okay. What's the truth now that the dust has settled on the performance against Japan, where Japan were ripping us apart, and particularly in that first half, and yet we went in ahead at half-time?
Yeah, it was a pretty mad game. It was hugely enjoyable. I think, first of all, it was like, I know you guys were both over in Japan. It kind of felt like we were back at the World Cup without any of the perks that come with being in a place like Japan. It was so, so surreal. Like, you see the number of Japanese media logging into the call afterwards and into the press conference, and it was kind of hugely encouraging that, because it's so hard to get a gauge on what Japan have actually done since the World Cup, because they just haven't been playing. So it was great to see that they still have a huge kind of media presence following them. But I mean, the fact that they had played 2 games, 1 test against the Lions and 1 game against the Sunwolves, and were still able to cause Ireland that many problems, I thought was pretty concerning, to be honest with you. I think they've been in camp, where they had been in camp for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, which is much longer than Ireland have been. And I think Andy Farrell was kind of pointing to that afterwards. But it's not really an excuse, is it? Like, I mean, the Ireland players have been playing high-level rugby for the last couple of years since the World Cup. So, yeah, I think it was concerning that Japan did a lot of the things that they did to Ireland in Shizuoka, that infamous day in 2019 that none of us will forget. And Ireland were still sort of naive to it. Now, I know it was a pretty different team. I think it was 8 players were involved from the last time, but it was still kind of the same mistakes. Like, Japan were still hurting Ireland on the edges. I mean, to concede 31 points is concerning, no matter if it is only a summer test. And I think even for someone like Andy Farrell, okay, he's the head coach now, but his background is in defence. So to concede 4 tries and 31 points was disappointing. But yeah, I think Ireland, what it showed to me was that the power of a team like Japan, who are so totally comfortable in their style of play and what they're doing and what they're being asked to do, and Ireland probably less so. I think they're still trying to figure out what kind of team they are under Andy Farrell and this backroom team. I think we saw glimpses of what they're trying to do and what they're about, but there was plenty of rustiness there, which on one hand was probably to be expected as well.
Okay, tell us what they're trying to do, because you seem to have spotted a trend where we set up loads of good attacking positions and then don't actually finish it off. And this is obviously in the context of us scoring 39 points as well. So that's, I guess, positive, but perhaps it allows us to diagnose a little bit about what we're trying to be, what our identity is, what we're reaching for.
Yeah, the set piece is still absolutely huge. I think 4 of the 5 tries came off the line out. And even, I think it was maybe 3 lineouts went awry as well. And they're the kind of things that really need to tighten up. I don't think that's a big change from what Ireland were trying to do under Joe Schmidt. The set piece has always been hugely important. But I suppose the one try that didn't come from the set piece was Stuart McCloskey's. And for me, I think there was a lot in that try that shows what Ireland are trying to do. I think, I've been pretty critical of Mike Catt's attack since he's come in as well, just trying to figure out what he's doing. And if you look back to maybe 4 elements of that try, it starts with Joey Carberry in the backfield. And I don't think Ireland have been offering much of a counter-attack at all, really, over the last couple of years. So I thought it was really encouraging to see Joey Carberry sort of take that on himself with the little chip over the top. I know he got a lucky bounce to get it back, but he still did really well. If you look at the next phase of that, obviously Carberry was on the ground in the ruck. You had Hugo Keenan hitting the line at like really a ferocious pace. And I think that's another thing Ireland haven't done. They haven't got that second playmaker into when the out half isn't in position. And I think Hugo Keenan is really stepping up in that regard. I thought he had another excellent game. Once Hugo Keenan goes through that gap, then all of a sudden Ireland are moving. And rather than try and, go to ground and recycle the ball fast, they're trying to keep it alive. And I thought that the movement through the hands there was really excellent from Stuart McCloskey linking with Peter O'Mahony. And then the final part of it, which I thought was really encouraging, was Peter O'Mahony throwing the offload, because I think I've spoken to you guys on the show before as well. I think we're all in agreement that we'd like to see a little bit more like that. And you see what Japan do when they throw the offloads, how effective it can be. Now, they're a bit loose as well, so I think there is a fine balance. But Ireland did try and throw a couple of more offloads. Caelan Doris had one in it. I know it didn't work, but there was at least a bit of intent there. So for me, that Stuart McCloskey try had a lot of elements of Ireland's game that they've been trying to add, and I thought it was really pleasing to see them put it all together and actually get a score at the end of it.
Is that what they're going for? So is that the sort of plan A, key? And you reckon, say if it comes to, let's say if we say when it comes to next year's Six Nations, for example, is that what they want to be doing? Because I guess the counterpoint has always been that when it comes to wintertime rugby and those sort of conditions, can Ireland actually get to that level consistently throughout those 5 games?
Yeah, I think it's more about trying to add strings to their bow. I really don't think like Ireland are going to become and start playing like Japan are doing. I think we'd all absolutely love, even if they took elements of what they're trying to do, because even if you take it from a purely entertainment point of view, even the All Blacks, Japan are one of the most exciting teams in the world to watch right now, and I include the All Blacks in that. They're just absolutely brilliant in what they do. I don't think Ireland are ever going to become a team like that, but at the same time, if they can add little things like they did for that Stuart McCloskey try, I think they have more strings to their bow, and they become a little bit more varied in attack. I think, like I said, four of the tries came off the line out. That's always going to be a huge part of Ireland's game plan. But I suppose we need to see more of those little variations, because I think since the 29 World Cup, we haven't seen a huge shift in terms of trying to do something different. And I suppose as we saw in the whole year 2019 and leading up to the World Cup, that really didn't get Ireland far. So I still think this is, what are we? We're a couple of years into Andy Farrell's reign. I still think we're trying to figure out what they're trying to do, and I wonder, are they a little bit trying to figure out what exactly they're trying to do as well, which, like I said, it's a little bit concerning. But I think having gotten the win over Japan, we'll probably see more changes this weekend, and we'll get to see a little bit more of the depth, hopefully anyway, against USA on Saturday.
Well, that leads us to the eternal question in Irish rugby. Who plays 10? What's the story with the 10? Obviously, does Joey Carbery play again this week because they've seen so little of him over the last couple of years, or what happens?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think Joey Carbery absolutely should play 10 again this weekend. I think, it's been, obviously Ireland should be in Fiji in the Pacific Islands right now on a tour that sounds like it would have been absolutely lovely in another time. But these games, I think, are still pretty important. And I know there was a lot of people who were a bit annoyed that certain guys didn't get more game time last Saturday against Japan. But if Ireland were to have lost, I think, it would have been bordering on a disaster really for Andy Farrell in terms of pressure building. So, yeah, absolutely. I think Joey Carbery is the guy they want to come through. I think he has been. You look at how patient Munster have been with him over the last couple of years. He was rusty at the weekend. I think that's totally understandable, but he did show intent. I talked about the try, he was the one from the counter attack, and he did try a couple of kicks. Okay, they didn't come off. His kicking from the ground was superb. So yeah, I would be fully in favour of giving him more game time this weekend. I think it's definitely worth having a look at Harry Byrne as well, and hopefully give him, more than sort of 5-10 minutes off the bench, maybe give him 20 minutes. But I don't think there's any doubt that in Ireland and in Munster, that they see Joey Carbery as kind of the next man coming through. So I think it was always going to be a step up, and he has been going pretty well for Munster, and I think he has really built in towards the end of the season, and he finished strongly. But it was a big step up. But you'd imagine having gotten the game time, and let's not forget either that because of the injury to Chris Farrell early in the second half, Joey Carbery was shifted out half again, which is sort of, his versatility is always going to come in handy. But for me, you've got to see him in that number 10 jersey for more minutes, for more game time than probably we did, because there's no doubt in November that Johnny Sexton is going to be back in there,
Is there no doubt? Because like Sexton is 36 on Sunday. He will turn 36, which means he'll be 38 when the World Cup rolls around. And like, are we starting a 38-year-old in the World Cup?
I think right now you probably are. Yeah, I don't think you've seen enough from the other out halves. I think, like I said, Joey Carberry is the one that you want to see building games into that. For me, Billy Burns, I don't think you want to be going into the World Cup starting with Billy Burns as your 10 personally. I think Ross Byrne, he's out of the squad now for his younger brother. I'm as excited as anyone about Harry Burns' potential, but we've got to be realistic as well here. I mean, he hasn't played a lot of big games for Leinster at all. He still is behind Ross and Johnny Sexton at Leinster. So that's why I think it's even more important that Joey Carberry plays this weekend. And fair enough, people can say it's only USA and whatnot, but like USA actually pushed a second string England team pretty close at Twickenham last weekend. But I think the more game time you can get for Joey, the better. But yeah, I think right now, Johnny Sexton is going to come back in. And you think about, okay, I know he missed out at the end of the season with Leinster, but you think about how well he finished the Six Nations and how good he played in that England game. I know we're talking 2 years on at the World Cup, but I suppose if you take it on face value now, then I think Johnny Sexton still is the best 10. And that's just the reality of the situation, I think.
It's obviously there's the management of his game time then between now and 2 years in the World Cup. How do they do that? Is it like play 10 games a year? I mean, at the end of his career, Claude McAlealy was essentially only playing in the Champions League games. Is that what we're saying with Sexton? He'll play, a half here and there in Europe and the Six Nations games, a half, 50 minutes, or is he coming off the bench in those games to mind him to get to the World Cup? How does that work?
I don't think you can totally wrap him in cotton wool in terms of Six Nations games. I don't think that will work at all. I mean, you look back at his minutes in Leinster over the last couple of years, and he doesn't play a huge amount in the Pro 14 or the United Rugby Championship, whatever we're calling it now. Europe, yeah, absolutely. I think they're the times you're going to see him, but I don't think that's a big departure from what he's been doing for the last couple of years. But I don't think it's realistic at all to think that, you can put Johnny Sexton in cold storage and roll him out for the World Cup. And I think it's a massive challenge for the likes of Joey Carberry and the guys who were behind him, because they're fully aware of what age Johnny Sexton is going to be by the time France 2023 rolls around. So to call a spade, it's an indictment on those guys if they're not able to really push and force the issue. Because if it's a no-brainer that a 38-year-old by the time it rolls around is going to start, or its first pool game, then that absolutely doesn't reflect well at all. And you might have a bolter coming through. I mean, it's a long shot, but like someone like Jack Crowley could break through next season and absolutely rip it up. But then where does that leave Joey Carberry? So yeah, it's a conundrum for sure, but I feel like in the here and now, it's important that Carberry gets that more game time, because these are the games where you need to see a little bit more variety. And that's why I can understand why people were probably a bit frustrated from the Japan game that maybe the likes of Gavin Coombs and Craig Casey didn't get a little bit more game time than they did.
Last question for you then, because we're a little bit out of time. But how many Irish starters do you expect in the Lions test, assuming the tests happen, assuming the tour continues? If we get to the first test, how many Irish Lions starters are realistic?
Yeah, fingers crossed we do get there. Well, I think Tadhg Furlong is absolutely nailed on. I think Ian Henderson has a great chance. I think a lot of it will depend on the makeup of the back row. I think probably Courtney Laws will play 6, and if Courtney Laws does play 6 and Itoje is in the second row, I think you can have an Ian Henderson in there with him. I think Jack Conan has a good chance if he can build on his game. Conor Murray is nailed on, and I think Bundy Aki as well. It'd be interesting to see how he goes tomorrow. Obviously, I think Bundy Aki's chances all hinge on where Owen Farrell is going to fit into the team. That's if he does, because I didn't think he was that impressive at 12 last week. So you could be looking at 4 and maybe 5 as a bolter, which at the start of the even when everyone was picking their squads, I think every Irish person would have taken that, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. And if Robbie Henshaw's hamstring...
Sorry, Henshaw, of course. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Henshaw.
But I suppose that's the great unknown, because we've obviously seen him suffer with these hamstring injuries, and they just linger a little bit, and you've got to be very careful with them as well. So, all of a sudden it's looking much better than it did kind of before the Six Nations. We were like, will any Irish players make the squad?
Except if it doesn't happen, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, hopefully it does. Like Henshaw, yeah, you're right to point him out. Absolutely, he's nailed on too. But like Henshaw, this kind of reminds me of the last World Cup, and Owen, you'll remember as well. Like Robbie Henshaw's hamstring was like a constant bone of contention in the early stages. So really, fingers crossed that that's not as serious, because like, I mean, the guy's in the form of his life, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Kid, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
Cian Tracey there from the Irish Independent, giving us some thoughts on the Irish rugby situation. Particularly that 10 conversation is one that we're going to be having a lot on this show and on all the other shows over the next 2 years, as we wait to see exactly what happens. And obviously, happy birthday to Johnny Sexton as well. 9 o'clock this morning here on OTB AM. OTB AM, of course, brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. What's your ideal scenario with 10?
That Joey Carberry gets back to the level he was at pre-injury and continues on that vein of form that he showed.
And he starts. And who's on the bench?
That's a good question.
Sexton's on the bench, isn't he? Wouldn't that be brilliant? Right out the last couple of years of your career, coming off the bench, winning games.
Yeah, and I guess it depends. But is that also an indictment of the substitute out half as well? Are we just saying that?
No. That is an all-time great player.
In fairness, it is,
wrestling the last few minutes from his career. That's what that is.
Yeah,
we don't have a culture of that in Ireland. We have you're no longer the player you were. Off you go. You're banished. You can't do the things you could do when you were 26. You're dead to us now. Instead of like, hey, you've got loads of game smarts and emotional intelligence, and loads of stuff. Maybe we could use some of those skills and qualities.
Jordan Henderson-esque coming off the bench to affect a team in a major tournament. I think one thing that could be important over the next little while as well is Carberry and Murray playing together at Munster. So I think the season ahead is a big opportunity. We're not going to have a decision on this in the next couple of weeks, obviously.
It's true, but like this time last year, we were like, yeah, Craig Casey and him together could be dynamite. And now it's like, Lions and Ireland captain Conor Murray. How things change?
Not Ireland captain.
Well, they might be. That's what I'm saying. Like, who knows? A minute past 9 this morning here on OTBM. Time for us to turn our attention to Wimbledon. I'm delighted to say Jenny Claffey is with us, a former Irish tennis professional. Jenny, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
This Wimbledon, we miss a few of the key players. We're missing Nadal and we're missing Serena in particular. It kind of feels like it's great to have it back. It's great to have the crowds there, but maybe we never knew how good we had it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, looking at Wimbledon this year, they had previously mentioned it was only going to be at 25% capacity. So it's fantastic to see the stadiums full. Disappointing with Williams, seeing that she dropped out in the second round with an injury. There's talk about her now, this being her last Wimbledon, so hopefully not. And with Nadal, you can see that the French Open, their last one, took its toll on his body. He fell at the semi-final stage to Djokovic, and he's now pulled out of Wimbledon and the Olympics. So it's a shame to see those big names, but also very exciting to see some of the up-and-coming players coming through.
Who's been exciting?
And in the women's game, I mean, the women's draw is it's wide open. Like, you can see that there's probably about 8 players now in the quarterfinal stage today. Each of them could win the match. You see Ash Barty of Australia. I put my money on her. She's a fantastic all-round player, and she's the number 1 in the world at the moment, and I reckon this could be hers to win. We also have some up-and-coming players like Maria Sakkari of Greece. She's a very physical player. Sabalenka, who's from Belarus. She's number 3 in the world. She's such a power hitter. She's playing today as well. She could threaten Barty, as I reckon. But we have about 10 women in the game. There's names there who you could really see coming through and winning the big majors in the coming years. And then obviously you look to the men's side, you see Djokovic, he's the kind of standout player there. But we have some next gen players as well. Stefanos Tsitsipas, he lost in the French Open final there. I mean, there's a few names out there like Rublev from Russia. He's also a very exciting player. The game is kind of evolving on both sides, so it's exciting to see.
What do you want to see happen over the next 5 years, say, Jenny? Like, do you want to see this chaos in the women's game continue, or do you want to see Osaka hopefully come back and then dominate, or maybe Goff go on to be a dominant player? What's actually best for the game over the next little while?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, for the game, it's great to see that there's such a wide variety of players now coming through. As I said, the game is evolving. The women's side used to be very predominantly power game. If you look at the likes of Serena Williams, she was just very dominant with big serve, big ground strokes. Now the players have much more variety in their game. So I think in the next few years, we're going to see that there'll be a few rivalries coming through. At the moment, there's just a few of them almost finding their form. They're still quite young, as you mentioned. Coco Gauff, only 17. We have Iga Świątek of Poland. She's also only 19. She's coming through. She's already won a Grand Slam. Osaka, of course, the big name there. She's won 4 Grand Slams already. She's doing amazing. I think that we're going to see, though, a few rivalries coming. Maybe not the likes of the Chris Evert, Martina Navratilova rivalry of a number of years ago. But I think for the spectators, obviously you want to see that there's the top 4, and they're the rivalry. Looking at the men's game, you know, the Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, Murray, they were the really dominant pair. I think the spectators, they like to see, you know, that there's going to be the hot favourites. But for the game, I think it's fantastic to see such variety at the moment.
How has the women's game changed since the advent of the absolute power that we've seen from Serena? Has there been an automatic copying? Is that what we're seeing, like a more athletic focused as opposed to the soft skills of the game? How has the game evolved, and where is it now?
Yeah, so I think like the way the games, if you looked at the men's game, the men's game looked like they played with a lot more diversity. They would have used like different spins, top spin, slice, and they would have played with a lot heavier ball. So the ball would be bouncing up much more because they're using top spin. Whereas the women's game, they would have been deemed playing very flat balls, very hard. Now you see that they're using different paces, different spins, there's drop shots being played, there's slice, there's different tactical elements being brought in, and then also they're much more physical, matches are lasting much longer now. As well as that, then there's the mental side of the game. I think the women's, both sides obviously are working on the mental side, but that's been huge in the last few years. But in the women's game, is definitely the more on-court stuff. You're seeing the different paces and spins versus those big hitter players.
And is that a direct response to Serena's power?
I think that's
a natural evolution.
Yeah, I think it's an evolution of the game, definitely. Like, there's more to tennis than just, those big power hitters. But there's still players like that who shape their game around Williams, like Sabalenka of Belarus. She's number 3 in the world now. She is a cannon of a serve. She's very powerful. So she would almost look quite like Williams. She's just more consistent maybe now. And she also has better, let's say, volleys, so she can come forward. So there's more options available to the women on the court now, or they've just developed that. Rather than the hard-hitting players. I don't think that game is completely gone. I just think that there's much more variety in the game now.
Okay. Give me some hope. Who's going to beat Novak Djokovic?
I think that's a tough task, a tough call this year in Wimbledon. I mean, he's seriously motivated to try to get his 20th Grand Slam and level off with Nadal and Federer. If there's anyone I could call out, really, I'm thinking, and I'm like, I can't see anyone beating Djokovic. He is just the all-round player. Like, he's the man to beat, obviously. His game is just so solid. He's a bit like Marmite. I think you either love him or you hate him. But his game is just one to beat. I think a lot of the players are basing their game around his style. I can't count that man out.
No, that's the problem, isn't it? I'm definitely in the hate him camp. I'm not a fan of Marmite. Do we take for granted a little bit apart from the quality of tennis he plays, but the fact that he just kind of seems to be unemotional a lot of the time when it comes to getting sucked into the magnitude of the occasion? I guess I'm saying he's a cold-blooded killer, right, on the tennis court. And do we maybe take that aspect of his talent a little bit for granted?
Yeah, I think he is just the absolute essence of mental resilience. He is so mentally tough. If you look at some of his matches this year alone, look at the French Open final, he came back from 2-0 down against Tsitsipas, who is this up-and-coming star. And you could just see after that second set, he was 2-0 down in the French Open final, and the steely look in his eyes that he was there. He's like, you just knew you couldn't count this guy out. I think that is a huge part of his game, and what makes him so good is that he's so mentally tough. He attributes that to a tough upbringing in Serbia, and also he says he works on the mental side of the game almost as equally as his physical side of the game. But yeah, I think that we do look at him and see his tennis, but really it's a huge part to do with his mental strength as well.
Have we seen a significant evolution over the last little while from Novak Djokovic? Has there been that reaction to age that we've seen yet? Because that's almost the most terrifying thing about Novak Djokovic, is that there could yet be another chapter after this spell of dominance that he's enjoying.
Yeah, I think that he's going to dominate for the next few years, especially if you look at, as I mentioned, those top 4 players like Federer. This could be his last year on the tour with the injuries he's had. Nadal, again, also injured. And Murray, if you look, he's also injured. So I think Djokovic is going to stay at the top. He's number 1 in the world now. He's won 7 of the last 12 Grand Slams. It's very hard to see him, unless an injury happens. I can't see him. He could nearly win 30 Grand Slams, I'd say, because you could just see his experience compared to the next generation players, those younger guys, the Zverevs, the Tsitsipas. He has that experience of winning, 19 Grand Slams. And he also has, as we mentioned, his mental toughness. And then he has this unbelievably versatile game where he's so hard to beat. So I really think that he's going to stay at the top for the next while.
Yeah, the 30, it kind of struck me there while you were talking that actually that's very realistic. It's not pie in the sky when you consider the speed at which he is accumulating titles at the moment, and the fact that that next generation, they really need to mature immediately if they're going to stop him.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard. If you just looked at that, as I said, the French Open final between Tsitsipas, he has come on into that final having won a number of events this year. His play on the court was phenomenal, but Djokovic just stood his ground. You could see he wasn't going to be beaten on the day, and those guys just almost crumbled. He played another match in the French Open, Djokovic, in previous round, where he was 2 sets slowed down as well against another next-gen player, Musetti of Italy, and Djokovic just outplayed the guys. You could see he was able to turn defence into attack when he was under pressure. He was able to mix up his game, and he just has that level of experience above those next-gen guys that I just find it hard to see how he's going to be beaten.
All right, jennyclaffey.com is the website address if anybody wants any coaching. I presume this is the busiest time of the year for you?
Yeah, summer is very good, very busy, especially now that Wimbledon is on. Everyone's out in their whites and out practicing on the streets.
Yeah, and that's as it should be. Jenny, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Great, thanks very much, guys. Take care.
JennyClaffey.com, as I said, is the website address if you want any more information on Jenny's career, or indeed if you want to book some coaching as well. It is 11 minutes past 9, OTB AM, brought to you by Gillette. Good mornings. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're back with the power rankings.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast? If not, here's some of what you've missed over the last week.
He got on the flight and he wasn't sure. He thought it might be dead.
It's not like he did what I did at Dalybone Park, you know what I mean, and rolled one into his own net.
I want this team to be a team that the Irish public are really proud of. I won't accept that we can't play from the back or we can't pass the ball.
For the best Euro 2020 coverage, subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and download the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Frankie Dolan caused a minor kerfuffle in the inter-county relationship between Mayo and Roscommon when he said that you need balls to actually go in All Ireland. You don't have a divine right for it. The question of whether or not our grand convener, the poobah of the rankings, has any balls will be decided today when he decides who is at number 1, because all of the signs are pointing that for the very first time in a long time, there is room for the tectonic plates to shift. That's the question. Does the grand poobah have the cojones, Co-Jones, to do it?
Are you talking about me or Kevin McStay now? Because McStay has done his power rankings in the Irish Times as well as.
Well, I wonder where he got that idea from.
No, he hasn't. He hasn't done his power rankings, but he did say no. He did list off the All Ireland contenders in order. So he went Dublin, Mayo, Kerry, Tyrone, Donegal. So he's got Dublin at 1, Mayo at 2, Kerry at 3, Tyrone at 4, Donegal at 5. So we'll see how we compare to that.
Is that trolling the county who... Is it? I don't know. Because that's not true. Well, I am not having that at the moment.
But we should find out what the truth really is then.
Let's go.
Because there's only one way to find out about this. We're going to go from 32 all the way down to 1. As per usual, the power rankings.
Okay, we always go straight over this. Did Waterford not have a good league? Did we not just hear that they were in the league semi-final?
The league semi-final was as a result of them being in a 3-team division, I think. Okay. I'm going to say that they'd one win. They had a 1-point win over Wexford, they had a 15-point defeat to Carlow, and they had a 7-point defeat to Antrim. That was their league. So that Antrim game was obviously their promotion head-to-head.
So I just think we've never spent any time on this page, and I don't mean to drag us into it.
I'm happy for it. I mean, I come equally prepared for this slot as any other page. So please, by all means, let's do it.
Well, I'm going to say I was very impressed by your ability to give me the league results from Waterford there very quickly. That was very impressive stuff.
I come armed with all this information every week, and for 24 out of the 32 teams, I never get to, distribute it.
Okay, well let's have some truth bombs about the so-called weaker counties.
Here's my hot take on what. No, I don't really have a hot take.
Stick the list back up there, because look, Wexford are 25, and you said Waterford beat Wexford in the league, did you?
Waterford beat Wexford in the league by a point.
Well, that's pretty impressive.
It is, yeah. It's a good result given what Wexford have done. But Waterford have been out in the championship. They've played.
I think you'd move Sligo down after what we saw from them in the championship, and even what Tony McEntee was saying about what these lads need to do. Anyway, just a thought. Waterford did get annihilated too, didn't they?
Well, exactly. They got annihilated by Limerick. They got beaten by 18 points by Limerick, and Sligo got beaten by 20 points by Mayo. So it's not an appreciable difference in the defeats that they suffered, except one was against Limerick, one was against Mayo. So, yeah, it was a grand league. Leitrim in between them. They haven't played in the championship yet, but they're playing Mayo this weekend. So I'm keen not to rush to any judgment on them, as in putting Sligo below them until I see that Leitrim avoid a 20-point defeat themselves this weekend. I would actually fear for them. 28 Carlow, they're on the way down. They're out of the championship. They lost to Longford by 6 points. We haven't done these since the championship started, by the way, so this is 2 weeks we're updating. 27 Wicklow obviously lost to Wexford by 3 points. Big shock there. Will O'Callaghan had them down as his lock of the week in our first week of quick picks, and they ended up losing that game.
That's fired.
Louth.
You haven't mentioned them without mentioning Will picked them as the lock of the week.
That's my piece of my one interesting fact on them. 26 Louth lost to Offaly by 9 points after extra time. They're staying put, and then Wexford up to 25. They were in 28 at the start of.
I feel like there's a lot of teams that you could move Louth up that Offaly game. Offaly not bad, but go on, okay.
Wexford obviously kind of a mixed bag. If we were doing it last week, they might be a bit higher than 25. Well, no, they wouldn't. They're staying put. The Dublin defeat does nothing to damage Wexford.
No.
Absolutely nothing to damage them.
I'd say it moves them up a bit, no?
Possibly. So I've actually gone with Laois at 24, if we move it on. And I did consider putting them down below Wexford. But the question is are Laois a worse team than Wexford?
I think it'd be a very close game if they played. If they were playing the qualifiers this week, and it got drawn in Wexford Park, right, which is, under the old scheme, potential that they would be out. Probably not as quick, but close enough, 10 days' time. How would you handicap a Laois at Wexford match in the championship?
2 points, maybe?
In favour of Laois?
And maybe 1 point in favour of Laois. I agree, it'd be a cracking game. What?
Haven't won a game this year?
Haven't won a game this year, no. And they've been bad defeats as well. Lost to Clare by 9, Cork by 8, Kildare by 13, down by 7. They're on the evidence of this year now. If you want to just put that back up on the screen, they're out of that category that we often have sludged together from, I guess, Tipperary, Cavan down. That's that sort of calibre of team. You would always have Laois in that mix, maybe even a little bit above that level over the course of the last 3 years. And I think after what we've seen this year, there's no debate that they have dropped down a rung. It's been a bad year. They are the biggest fallers in this week's power rankings, so they're down to 24th.
Okay, so Longford are 23.
Yeah, Longford
are managerless. I suppose so are Laois now. I mean, I think you could definitely make a case for, you're right, the blanket being thrown over these. I know Antrim lost by 13 points, but I still think that their league campaign was good enough that you could potentially put them ahead of both Cavan and Tip. We'll
see what happens this weekend. Tip and Cavan, neither of them have yet to play in the championship. So last week, if we want to throw the quick picks insult out about Will O'Callaghan, I tipped Laois to beat Westmeath at the weekend, even though there was no recent evidence to suggest it. I just feel sometimes a county can show up to the championship and they just render the league completely meaningless. It can sometimes happen, and maybe I'm giving a bit of the benefit of the doubt to Tip and Cavan in that regard, because they haven't played yet. It's going to be hard to make a case based on either of those counties on the back of this weekend. They play Kerry and Tyrone respectively, so it's probably not going to be the fairest way to judge them.
A victory would certainly.
Now the thing is, so let's just go through why. So Longford, losing to Meath by 22 points, that's not a reason to put them above Tipperary or Cavan. Fermanagh losing to Monaghan by 10 points, again, not enough of a reason to move them up above Tip or Cavan, and then Antrim losing by 13 points to Armagh. Now, Antrim would have always been on the first page of these power rankings, so they've already made their stride forward. The question is, do they make that next step? And losing by 13 points to Armagh was not enough of a reason to do so. Tip and Cavan, as we've said, 2019, no movement on their side of things. Down a couple of places from 16. They've obviously been dumped out of the championship, lost by 16 points to Donegal. A grand league campaign from Down is what I'd put it down to as well.
The up-down chant has never been more meaningless.
Never more meaningless, exactly.
It's down.
They are plummeting. 17 then, Limerick staying put. They're still in the championship, beat Waterford by 18 points, and I just couldn't put them above Offaly. This was another very close one, but
Offaly, that's a good question. Limerick, Offaly in the championship. Good game.
It would be. Their league campaign match was a 2-point win for Offaly. Offaly, obviously.
Where was that? Do you know?
I don't have that, and I've ran out of characters on my Google Doc, which has infinite characters. Offaly won all their games except for that Derry match, which they lost by 12 points in the league final. That maybe was never going to happen anyway. So you could be talking about a 100% league campaign.
Tullamore, 16 points to 111. Offaly beat Limerick.
And it would be a tight one. It would be
a game,
be a great one to see in championship. And I think Offaly and would love to have a run through the qualifiers. Limerick.
This is a good L division, right? If we're a tiered division, Meath, Kildare, Roscommon, Cork, Offaly, Westmeath, Clare and Derry, you've no idea who's winning any of those games in most circumstances on a home and away basis, or even at a neutral venue.
Yeah.
Kildare would stupidly be favourites in most of the games and then lose half of them.
And that's true. I do think, it's the one day that Tommy Rooney's on holiday here, but Meath, a big rise up to 9. I'm starting to think that they've actually they're starting to create a bit of daylight between them and some of those counties, actually. I think they are the one team, and they are the highest ranked team in that stage, obviously.
I wouldn't be backing Meath against Roscommon. Certainly not if it was in Roscommon. I wouldn't be backing Meath against Westmeath. We might see that yet in the Leinster final. Meath, Clare, did Clare not just... But Meath beat Clare, didn't they?
In the league, I'll give you the exact result here from Meath against Clare. They didn't play each other in this year's league. They're in different sides of the Division 2. They're Meath, they beat Westmeath, they beat Down, they lost to Mayo, and they lost to Kildare, and that's you then.
See, I can't really have Meath ahead of Kildare in these power rankings. It doesn't make any sense at the moment on what we've seen.
Well, what we saw at the weekend was a 22-point win.
Against Longford.
Against Longford.
Kildare beat Offaly, who were on the same page as them.
Yeah, I guess that is a fair point. 5-point win against Offaly.
And not playing well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Maybe I'm being too generous to me then as a result of putting them up to 9.
At the same time, Kildare coming in I should be yearing away our chances here.
You can also look back to maybe recent championship matches between them. It was a 9-point win for Meath over Kildare last year in the championship.
Is that all? It felt like it was 22 points.
It did feel like that, actually. It's kind of surprising.
Kildare scored a lot of late goals as well.
They might have done after Meath scored a lot of medium-time goals. But just to kind of run through that page for any radio listeners, we had Offaly there at 16. We had Westmeath, the big risers this week, up from the 20s into the mid-teens. They're at 15 after they beat Laois by 16 points. It's an extraordinary win. They were trailing at half-time. It was an unbelievable second half from Westmeath.
Are we sleeping on Westmeath?
A little bit. You're saying, they got relegated from Division 2, that's kind of what you'd expect, but actually they were competitive in every single game they played. And
I remember listening to the Paddy and Andy pod, and was it Paddy or Andy said, it might have been Andy saying Westmeath look like they're an exceptionally coached team, even though they got beaten. Did Mayo beat them?
Mayo only beat them by 3 points, so they lost to Meath, Mayo and Down.
They did really well in that Mayo game. I saw a good bit of it. And Andy was very impressed with them. He literally said they're an exceptionally coached team, and he does not say that about a lot of teams.
No.
So I don't know, maybe we're sleeping a bit on them. They're 4-point underdogs for the game against Kildare. I think that's much closer to 50-50. Kildare are 7-2 on, and Westmeath are 10-3.
And that's the real test of your theory. Could everybody on this page beat each other? Because I think that will be a really interesting provincial semi-final. I think the truth is that we did sleep on Westmeath. Like, they're up from 24 to 15 in the space of 2 weeks. I massively underrated this Westmeath team, had them below this rung, and I was wrong. They've been excellent, and I was wrong about that Laois game on Sunday. They were obviously blew them away, and that's down to them as much as it is down to.
They should be ahead of Clare here, and I think at this stage, given that they're still in the championship, and there's a good chance they could reach a final, whereas Clare have had their run and they're on the second page, and they should be on the second page. But
I don't want to put too much stock into the league, but Westmeath did get relegated and Clare almost got promoted to Division 1.
Fair enough. Clare didn't perform in the big game that we expected them to perform against Kerry.
How would Westmeath get on against Kerry in Killarney?
I mean, they would lose that game. We know they would lose that game. Would they lose the game by as much? I don't know. It's hard I presume Kerry would take them for granted because they had never seen them before, and probably scratch out a 7 or 8 point win where like they forget about it immediately.
Maybe, but like it did feel like they scratched out the win against Clare at times as well, and they just blew them away. They just the firepower. Maybe kind of inflates the results. Derry up to 13th, no championship game just yet, but since we've done this, they played that Division 3 final against Offaly and won it by 12 points. It was a really impressive victory from Derry. They are the risers at the moment, and they're ready to make that next jump into the top dozen. Cork down again, possibly a team I've overrated a little bit. We'll see what happens. Cork Limerick in the Munster Championship is. I'm think there's a chance? I'm excited. I'm just excited to see what happens. To see if Limerick can actually run Cork, because Cork are obviously this very untrustworthy entity where they can do absolutely anything, where I would absolutely give them a chance once again in the Munster final against Kerry if it is Kerry that come through. But I also give Limerick every chance of beating them. It is a strange team that they are. They've got such a high ceiling but such a low floor. 11 Roscommon, they're down. They've, I guess, been leapfrogged by Meath in reality. Lost to Galway, obviously.
Cork are 10-1 on to beat Limerick.
Well, it's
7 point favourites. They're not covering that.
But the thing is, they could. That's the thing with Cork. They could win that game by 20 points.
Could they?
Or they could lose it.
Could they win that game by 20 points?
This is the wildly fluctuating nature of Cork. Maybe 20 points is an exaggeration, but they do have extremely good firepower. I know they've got a couple of injuries at the moment. It's going to be an interesting. I think 10-1 on is extremely tight for that at the moment. Kildare non-mover at 10. Meath are the team I'm giving a lot of credit to. Maybe I'm overrating Longford a little bit, but I think that 22-point win is seriously impressive. I'd love to see that game against Dublin played in the provincial ground.
Flat track bullies, that's what they are. Flat track bullies.
They are, and you know what?
They've been cursed ever since the ole.
They've flat track bullied their way into a bit of movement. They are the highest movers in this week's power rankings.
Right, that's incorrect. These power rankings are incorrect. We're getting
if you get on the final page,
let's go. Come on.
So it just proves that they were so correct last time. No, but that's what I mean.
Not a single move.
It just means that they were so perfect the last time.
Have you just arrived in and realised I haven't done my homework?
These are. I've gone through all of these. So there is.
Tell the radio people so we can have a talk about this.
There's no reason to move any of these teams. Galway are in at 8. No reason to doubt them. They beat Roscommon by 5 points. Monaghan are in at 7th. No reason to doubt them. They beat Fermanagh by 10 points. Armagh are in at 6th. No reason to doubt them. They beat Antrim by 13 points. Tyrone in at 5. No reason to move them anywhere. They haven't played a championship game. 4, Donegal, they beat down by 16 points. Mayo beat Sligo by 20 points. They're at 3rd. Kerry in at 2nd, beat Clare by 17 points. But if you had one doubt over one of these teams, it's actually in at number 1.
Yes.
Dublin, who could only get an 8-point win against Wexford. But they've got a little bit of credit in the bank, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, they do have credit in the bank, but these power rankings are for today. What would happen today? And you would be given, in your head, you will be making the case for Kerry to beat Dublin. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. I think that Galway can realistically think that they've moved up a little bit because they've recovered from the league. Damien Comer, it said in the paper, started his first championship game in 3 years.
That was incredible. I couldn't believe that statistic.
I couldn't either. I thought that was oh, Jesus, that is game changer for them. And I also think injuries from Monaghan and Donegal's perspective can realistically move them down. And I think Cian McGinley was very unhappy afterwards with the Armagh performance in terms of the quality that they showed, and yet they still did win by 13 points. So I don't know. I feel like Armagh could do a bit of damage yet. But I think that to go back to Frankie Dolan, You need balls to win All-Ireland, and I just think you've bottled it here, Eoin. I really fundamentally think that this was your one chance, your one opportunity. Where was I reading in the papers earlier about the players who were missing from the 2017? It was Frank Roche's piece, that was it. So just let me go through this, right? Dublin in 2017, he says, were pretty much at their best when they pipped Mayo. From that year's All-Ireland 15, starting 15, they've lost Cian O'Sullivan, Jack McCaffrey, Paul Mannion, Paddy Andrews, Owen O'Gara and now Cluxton. On the bench that day, they had Bernard Brogan, Dermot Connolly, Paul Flynn, Michael Darragh Macaulay, Darren Daly, Kevin McManaman. Now, it looks like Kevin McManaman's going to the Olympics. I'm not sure yet if he is or not. But, so they're the players who are missing, right? And the players who aren't still at their best, who were playing that day, Philly McMahon and Johnny Cooper, who might not play. Which leaves Mick Fitzsimons, John Small, who's injured.
Yeah,
and
that's a big injury.
James McCarthy, Brian Fenton, Kieran Kilkenny, and Dean Rock, who's just going back into the
injured as well, isn't he?
And McDade's injured.
He came off injured.
Yeah. Come on, it's now. It is as the Brits are all saying in the front of their papers. It's now or never.
Don't put the Frank Roche piece away just yet, because what does he say about Evan Comerford in that piece? Somebody, I presume Roche has seen a lot more of Comerford than I have. I've watched him play nationally. Already
ranked as one of the game's top 5 keepers.
There you go. So for me,
does he though? You can't say that. We haven't seen him. You can't. You know, he has the potential to be, but you can't rank him in the top 5 now.
He also said that Peter Keane would bite your hand off for Evan Comerford right now. Not something I'd necessarily agree with, but again, something I could be completely wrong on, that maybe if Shane Ryan comes back to be Kerry goalkeeper, he actually isn't ready to become one of the best goalkeepers in Ireland. Maybe Fitzgibbon, who's in goals at the moment, isn't ready to hold that goal down. And maybe Kerry could actually have a bigger problem in goals than Dublin do this year, which is one of a number of reasons why you might have a little bit of a doubt. I'll put this question to you. All-Ireland final, Croke Park, 50,000 people there, let's say, if we're optimistic. The scores are level, clock in the red, into injury time. Who are you backing, Kerry or Dublin?
This year I'm backing Kerry.
Right?
This year.
Yeah, I'm still backing Dublin in that scenario.
Well, it's a good point, an excellent point, right? Down to 14 men, we always talk about what happened when Kerry had the ball and they just didn't have the game smarts to realise that Cluxton was out as the final defender making up the numbers. He's not going to be there to do that this year. He's not going to be able to say, OK, don't worry, I've got whoever it was it Tommy Walsh, whoever he was marking, he'd push up to mark in those last few minutes. That's gone. That game smart. You cannot take that intellectual property out of the Dublin team and it not have an impact.
I agree. And it's definitely damaging to their chances, but there are so many other areas where they have that game smarts, and you can teach Evan Comerford that. He's been a sponge, I'd imagine, in Dublin training for the last few years while he's been in there. He's not new. He's not a rookie who's just come in this season. He's been around for a few years himself. Like, Dublin are going to be fine is the likely outcome here.
Are they going to be fine? Are they? Is it like we kind of said that the whole way along with when Kilkenny were going for their 5 in a row, it was all going to come good. But like Kilkenny, I don't know if everybody remembers, they played 2 guys with cruciate ligament injuries in the All-Ireland final because teams are absolutely desperate to keep things going. But you can't last forever. At some point that cycles off, and then I've no doubt they come back harder and stronger next season with a bunch of new players who are at a very, very high level because they've been conditioned by the culture, and you still have Fenton and Conn and Kilkenny. But that's like, you can make a plan for Fenton and Conn and Kilkenny when you don't have to also worry about Connolly and Brogan and Paul Flynn and McManaman's coming off the bench to be a completely different challenge. Right. All of a sudden, the number of problems that Dublin pose to you is not the same as it used to be. Paddy Small's a good player. Paddy Small's a good player, but is he one of the all-time greats just yet? Is he at that level? Not quite.
No, but like I agree with what you're saying.
Scully's very good, but like, is Scully's form going to persist the whole way through?
So it comes down to this: who is going to be the Lar Corbett in football? Because that is what it will take for the first one. All I'm saying is just for the first one. For the first time for Dublin to get knocked off the perch, it'll take a Lar Corbett in an All-Ireland final. And absolutely, that's why Kerry are number 2 and why they're
have 4 or 5 of them. Kerry actually have 4 or 5 potential Lar Corbetts in that team, and you know it.
And that's why I'd worry about Mayo. I think Tyrone and Donegal potentially have that this season. Obviously next year when Killian's back, Mayo will have that as well. So my question then comes back to, can Kerry get into a position where they're 4 points up when the clock is in the red rather than level scores in the red? Because I don't think they win the All-Ireland if they're in that. And that goes for every team. I think they're the team best placed to have a 4-point lead in Dublin going into the clock in the red. That's why they're at number 2. But
I think
are
it's
they
gonna
good
be-
enough to get that lead up?
I think it's going to be
And
decided on the day.
I'm still obviously not committed to them.
I haven't looked this up, and I'm sure they could change it if everything was good with replays and stuff. But I think it's going to be decided on the day, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I actually don't know for sure off the top of my
And
head.
I think
but
that's important because for once you look at the Dublin bench and it's not as strong as it has been.
That's actually fair.
I realise that everybody who is a Dublin fan is like, this is not what you've been saying for the last 5 years, and you've been saying the county should be split into 4 because of the numbers, and I still believe that. That doesn't mean that these retirements aren't going to have an impact.
I'm also conscious, like I think this could be a really, this could be a far more realistic conversation in 2 weeks' time after we see Dublin finally get their homecoming. They're back at Croke Park with 10,000 people there, hopefully.
Yeah, not challenged until the All-Ireland semi-final this year.
But it's a good, I think Meath is always a good temperature check now. It's a different temperature check to what it used to be in the 2000s, where if they win, they were in good shape. The temperature check now is can they beat Meath by over 16 points? And
what was it was a 4-3 at half-time a couple of years ago? And that was the one that gave us this false sense of hope.
It was something like that. Meath had certainly only 3 points, and did they not score in the second half or something like that?
I think Meath had missed a couple of goal chances as well.
Yeah, and there was an early burst from Meath last year in that game as well, and things just kind of fizzled out. And Dublin just have this gear that no other team has in the country. And like it's Con O'Callaghan catching a kick out and storming through the middle of your defence and saying, "This is my game." Con O'Callaghan didn't even score at the weekend.
Yeah.
So are we saying that that's going to be the norm for the rest of the year? Absolutely not. He's one of the best players in the country. He's one of the best forwards of his generation. So that's going to be corrected. There are a number of other things you can go through in this Dublin team that are going to be corrected over the next little while. And
we're assuming they're going to be corrected because they always have been.
Con O'Callaghan will definitely be corrected.
Past performance is not an indication of future whatever. Terms and conditions apply. That's the thing.
Kind of, but I think we can be pretty certain when it comes to McCarthy and Fenton and Con and
Put
Kilkenny.
Kerry in at number 1. Come on, move it, change it. This is your time.
Are Kerry the best team in the country right
Yeah,
now?
right now they are.
They're the best
They are
contender
right now.
to Dublin
This
at the
week
moment.
they are. Dublin just struggled to get over the line against Wexford.
You could like, is it actually the? So if we're going to just base it on championship performances, like is the win against Clare actually the best performance we've seen so far? I think not, to be honest. So like, Dublin did struggle against Wexford. It's just stupid to think.
Give me a percentage chance that Dublin are going to win the All-Ireland based on the evidence right now. One word. What
60.
percentage? 60. All right. Okay. Here, if the actual Kerry panel are half as scarred by Dublin as Sheahan are, they'll never get over the line, says Will on YouTube.
I don't think I'm...
Yeah.
Is it scarred by Dublin to suggest that Con O'Callaghan is going to be better than scoring 0 points against Wexford?
Yeah, okay. He's obviously going to score, but maybe there was a plan in place. Maybe the evidence is so overwhelming that
what the plan is for Con not to score?
You've got access. Maybe they marked him properly. Maybe Wexford had a plan for Con that worked.
Like unlike the game where he ran riot in the league against the team that you were saying are going to win the All-Ireland, like against... I mean, there's a lot of...
That game was a draw.
That game was a draw, but Con O'Callaghan destroyed the defence he was up against. I don't know. It's tight, and it is as close as I think that it's been since we started doing these.
A hair's breadth, and I'm just tilting it towards Kerry for the sake of.
Okay, let's make a promise here. If Meath can come within 6 points of Dublin and Kerry uphold their end of the bargain against Tipperary,
this day next week, there will be a change at the top of the rankings.
Well, it'll be 2 weeks because Dublin aren't out until Sunday week. But the week after that, for sure, Kerry and Dublin will both have played again. And if Kerry do over a 15-point win against Tip and Meath come within 6 points of Dublin, I'll move Kerry up to number 1.
All right. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. That's this week's Power Rankings. Here's what we got on OTB Sports Radio today. Live at 11 o'clock, it is the Euro Show. At 1 o'clock, OTB Gold is Jerry Eisenberg, the legendary boxing writer, talking about his relationship with Muhammad Ali. At 3 o'clock, it's Dadcast, a career retrospective from Jason McAteer. At 4, and Ronnie Delaney talking about winning gold in Melbourne. At 6 o'clock. Tonight we'll be reacting to Italy against Spain on the tomorrow show and looking ahead to England against Denmark tonight. Obviously they'll be talking you through Italy against Spain on the evening show on Off the Ball on News Talk. Subscribe to the OTB AM podcast and to Off the Ball on YouTube. Give us a rating on iTunes, very helpful for us as well. Here's Keith Wood and Niamh Briggs talking about the weekend's rugby. Enjoy.
Now you're welcome along. So we have lots to discuss. The news from South Africa today, if you didn't catch it, the Springboks are once again back in isolation after another positive test in their camp. They did beat Georgia by 40 points to 9 on Friday evening, but a concerning situation. Repeat of the drama of last week in their camp. The Lions, of course, beat the Sigma Lions 56 points to 14 on Saturday in Johannesburg. A stiffer test perhaps on Wednesday, where there will be live commentary, by the way, here and Off the Ball of their match against the Sharks. Ian Henderson will captain the Lions. And closer to home, of course, in Dublin on Saturday, with 3,000 in attendance, Ireland were 39 points to 31 winners against Japan. We have brought in the serious rugby intellects of our panel, Wood and Briggs, here to give us some serious home truths. How you both doing?
Great, thank you.
How are you?
Have to apologise, everyone. Niamh is wearing a Munster top. There's an unabashed bias here on display, but she insisted.
Heavy training straight away.
So let's start with the action of the weekend then. Ireland 39, Japan 31. The lead changed hands 7 times, 9 tries, another 1 or 2 disallowed. It was strange kind of game, Keith. Exciting, like far from dull, but where was this in the, how do you compare this to proper test match, World Cup match? Because I think Ireland had 14 missed tackles even in the first half alone.
Yeah, I don't think you compare it to a World Cup test match at all, and I don't think you should. I think you should look at it as a summer tour game, even though it's Japan are touring here and not the other way around as it would normally be. I thought it was exciting because Japan were exciting. I still want to see more and more and more from Ireland in attack, in their back line. I was just looking through the potential team that we may have at the weekend coming up against the States, and I'm hoping that Joey Carberry gets another run there because he just needs to play an awful lot of rugby. He's still trying to find his feet. He still hasn't fully got his confidence back or his control of the game, and he hasn't played a huge amount at international at 10. So the more he gets, if he's perceived as being the guy that we all think and hope he is, then we want to see more from him. But it's hard not to look at a game like that and look at Japan and say, oh my God, is this not the way to play the game? The joy that they play with, I think the respect that they play with, the disappointment in Jamie Joseph talking about the loss, but saying, my God, they're true to the word and true to their philosophy. There's an element of joy in that. There's no pressure on them, of course, but look, we got the win, and for that we'd be happy. But I just think Japan light the world up when they play.
What did you make of it, Niamh?
Yeah, similar. I think I really enjoyed Japan. I thought the attacking philosophy of their squad is like absolute joy to watch. I think from an Irish perspective, I'm still not really sure what Ireland are trying to do in attack at times. I felt when they played with pace and got around the corner and were able to clear a ruck with one ball, and in the next sweep, Gibson Park's able to move it, then Ireland looked good in terms of their ability to be able to play on the gain line and to hit space. For me, there was loads of elements, especially in that first half, where they couldn't gain any momentum. I think Japan are technically so good tackle in the breakdown. Their body height's so low. They don't swing off tackles like Ireland did at times, I thought the other day. So from that perspective, definitely think brilliant to get a win. Likes of Van der Fleer, I thought O'Mahony, Keenan were excellent. So there was definitely positives, but you were almost kind of, which sounds really bad, but you were almost kind of willing Japan to see what else they could do, because their ability to go wide straight away and to play these almost like rugby league passes out the back, and play to their strengths. He they spoke about Jamie Joseph talking about afterwards, and they stayed true to their philosophy even though they lost their match. What I love about them is they play how they want to in terms of what suits them. They know they're not the biggest, they know they're not the most physical, but they're technically proficient in every aspect of what we call the basics, and then they work their game plan around that. I think at times Ireland, especially not just Ireland, a lot of teams this side of the world are guilty of trying to fit into a certain type of game plan or a certain type of way of playing, as opposed to playing what suits that team and that squad. Makes any sense.
Yeah, Bernard Jackman was on yesterday doing a review of the Sunday papers, Keith, and he was saying that from his memory, I thought after 2019 we were supposed to try and play a bit more like Japan. You know, we talked in our World Cup review about having a skill set deficit and a need to improve that, and I don't know, we can get quite excited now when we see the odd offload from an Irish team, but then Japan come along and you realise they're operating in this department at a totally different plane.
And they are, but it isn't just that, actually. I wrote a couple of notes watching it. I thought Tamura gave a kicking masterclass. Yeah. I bemoan our predilection for box kicking, but I love the idea of a dink. I love the idea of a dink that bounces up when it's supposed to, or a grubber, or whatever array that he decided to use. But their rucking pace, like hit, go to ground, get it into the scrum half hands, sling the ball. That's their way of playing. The hands and the intent was to tire people out really quickly. So I thought that was pretty fantastic. So if I was going to say the one thing, they're smaller, a lot of their players are smaller, not all of them, and some of the imports that they have are particularly big. But it's the pace at which they do everything. That's what's exciting. I mean, you can understand why they're scoring tries. Your forwards, big forwards, trying to get up off the ground, and there's a flurry of activity happening at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and they're offside or they're not in a good defensive position. They're falling off tackles because they probably shouldn't be making them. They may be offside anyway. But it is the pace and the relentless pace that they play on. There was another comment from Jamie Joseph, and I'll paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me, but it was, we have to play smart and play differently and play fast because we're not big enough to play against some of the teams. So we really have to think about what we're doing. I mean, there's a mantra that you would have to any coach to say you want to get the best out of the team. I think that's kind of adding on to Niamh's point. But there's something to be learned from them. Not just their work ethic is at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's like Ireland's work ethic is very good. They get to the right places, they do the right thing within the systems, they're always there. But actually, Japan's seems to be there quicker. So I don't know whether that is just because they're lighter and they're not having to carry as much tonnage around the field or not. But there is, like, you're looking at it and saying, well, one team's exciting and one isn't. But the non-exciting team, our team, won at the weekend. So it's hard to bemoan that too.
Ultimately, Niamh, at half-time, because the first half, there was about a 25-minute spell in the second half of the first half where Japan were electric and just great fun to watch. And even the most patriotic Irish person watching had a sneaking regard for them and maybe wanted them to keep going, okay? And then I guess you see the downside of their approach when Matsushima throws a loose pass and Ireland get a try as a result. And it's 19-17 to Ireland at half-time. And didn't feel like it was Ireland's half, but they were up at half-time. Why did Ireland ultimately push on and win the game in the second half for you? What told for Ireland?
I think a couple of things. I thought the likes of O'Mahony, Van der Fleer took the game by the scruff of the neck in terms of that forward pack and drove them. I thought the intent of which they tried to play, I thought they hit the ball at pace more. And it's not just the running space. It's what Keith spoke about, how good Japan are there earlier on. It's their ability to get tackled, and in the next, that ruck is less than 2 seconds long. It's probably less than a second, and Gibson Park is flinging it away. That's why Ireland were able to get on top. Obviously, their set piece was quite good. I thought the line-up functioned very well, and the scrum for the most part. But in terms of that, it was the hard yards. I feel sometimes that Ireland become very static. They run very close to rucks. So their forward pack run, if we look at a defensive structure right beside the ruck called a pillar, and then people are outside it, they run very narrow to that ruck. So at times that's where the heavies are, and it's really easy to be double tackled. I thought towards, especially that second half, Ireland looked to be wider off that ruck, but also looked to play more like what we call a tip-on pass, so to pass to the forward outside that, or a pass out the back to the likes of Carberry or Stuart McCluskey, who I thought also had a very good game. So it was their ability to move the points of contact, because I think in the first half, I was kind of shocked with how proficient Japan were at tackling. They were double tackled, but their ability to bounce straight back onto their feet, and there was very little space anywhere. So they're in the front line, so therefore the space must have been in the back line, in that back field. Hence when Joey Carberry chipped, okay, he was real brave to get it back, but they got a try off it, and in that kind of sense, it just sits that defensive set back on their heels a small bit. I thought that they looked more likely to do something like that in the second half.
Keith, for you, what was the big winning moment for Ireland, or winning development in that second half? Because first half it looked very precarious for a long time.
It did, I'd agree with Niamh. I thought Peter O'Mahony shone in the second half in particular. I thought Van der Fleer, I'm mad about Van der Fleer. He plays really well all the time. It's great to see Caelan Doris back playing, getting over the gain line. I love the assurity that Hugo Keenan gives. I think he's going to make mistakes. He's still learning his trade, but I think he's very good. I thought there was enough of people there who have played big championship games who knew to close it down to win it. So we're kind of criticising why they won, but we're not. And I think the second half looked a little bit, I can't say more structured, but they just got a little bit more control in it at different times. They cut out some of the silly errors that they were making, tidied up some of the lineouts, called them to different positions, tidied up the kickoffs, which were a mess, and that's a system mess. That's when you say, I was looking at the lifts that were happening for James Ryan, and it just wasn't in the right place, and there were a couple of things like that just said, they're just messy because they haven't done them. A lot of these players haven't done them. So it's funny. I don't think when we had our full team out against Japan 2 years ago in a big game that mattered and we lost. This is a group of guys who don't have a huge amount of first team experience and some experienced heads, and they got the result, which is unbelievably important to do. I still think, I go back to Niamh's point, we're still not seeing, I think, something very exciting in our backline that does a lot. And so that would be the only sort of hesitation or negative for me, is that, we're still lacking confidence, or whether the coaches are not getting that across or whatever it is. But you could see there was a change. There is a change, but it's just happening at a slower pace than you'd want it to happen at. So a final one on that before we move to the lines. That sort of sounds, Niamh, like we're back to a lot of our conversations in the Six Nations before the England game.
Yeah, I do. I agree with Keith. I think it is changing, and I'd have no issue with the likes of, for example, Doris spilling the ball forward, trying to offload, because for me, he's trying to offload, and now is the time for us to be able to try it in the heat of the moment, because you could do it at training all the time, but you can't replicate that kind of intensity. And for me, that's why I love watching Japan so much, is because their ability to throw offloads, but also pick the right options, their decision making under such pressure as a line speed defence, like an Irish, like for most part was quite good off the line. They're that's probably one of the best in the world. They're one of the best in the world to be able to do that. Ireland are not there, but their intent is there. So I do think, I would hate to see them go back into their shell again. It probably won't happen against the USA, but coming back around to those next November internationals, you want to see them to be able to try and do it, and to keep being encouraged to do it. But 100%, there were definitely times where I felt like we depended way too much on Joey Carberry as first receiver, and also we kind of lacked a little bit of direction or of ideas. So if Joey carried in, or felt like we were all running really close unders or hard lines as opposed to having options out the back all the time, there has to be, if you're looking to break down a defence like a Japan team where they're filling the field so much, you have to be able to play to a wide like in between the two 15-metre channels, that's where you've got to be aiming for, because that's where they're going to be a small bit skinny, and that's where you have the most opportunity to be able to win your ruck. I think at times Ireland lack that ability to get it there because they've had to work really hard at the ruck, and there's more bodies in there than on their feet at times.
Okay. Well, we'll park that and see how they go against the US at the weekend. Just to remind you, live commentary throughout the British and Irish Lions tour on Off the Ball. So continues this Wednesday with the game against the Sharks. We have the first half live on OTB Sports Radio from 5, and then we'll continue on News Talk for the second half from 6:45 onwards. And our coverage is brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. So first match on South African soil, Keith, against the Sigma Lions, who will be the weakest opposition that the Lions face over their 8 games on South African soil. A 42-point win. Josh Adams, 4 tries. That's 5-2 now for Adams. Hamish Watson was man of the match. Finn Russell was a 10. What can you take from this?
I don't know that you take a huge amount for it. This may be our most negative programme yet, but it's not negative really. Sigma Lions were poor, really poor. Bottom of the heap for the Rainbow Cup. Playing against still a group of guys that haven't played together, all the English guys and cup finalist guys. They're all integrated into the squad. They haven't spent any time together. That's really hard work. It's tough to do. You're going into the game, you know you're not going to lose. You don't want to let that attitude infiltrate your thinking, because you don't get stuck into it hard enough, or you don't run the right line. And I think there were, again, to one of Niamh's points, in terms of balls that were dropped and Finn Russell balls that were dropped, unless people have played with Finn and trained with him, balls are going to drop on the ground all the time, because he is that unusual type of talent. So you need to be entirely aware, because it doesn't matter what's called, I would say. I would say you have to be prepared and have your hands up and ready, no matter where you are on the pitch, because there's a good chance it could be slung at you, even if it doesn't make any sense. I still think that there's a place for him, actually.
Yeah. And, times I'm watching him, 12th minute, crossfield kick in his own half, barely gets away without it being intercepted. And I just thought to myself straight away, no. This is madness. No chance.
Yeah, I think if we get to, I think there's a different coaching ticket. If they get to the idea that you need that spark of brilliance, and like we say this about different players over the years, if you can temper it by 5%. So the negative commentary that you've just given on him there, the fact that gets talked up all the time, it doesn't talk up the good things that he has done in terms of. Now, I think he made a load of mistakes the other day, so I'm not extolling all his virtues. But as the players get used to him, if they see him as being an opportunistic 10, and if you have somebody else who can give a bit of proper control on the field, be it Farrell or whoever at 12, then I could see him getting a chance and an opportunity to do it. But not if he decides to think that every single play you have is an opportunity. You just need to take some hint of discipline in it. Wow. And you can learn those things on the Lions tour. You may not, though.
Maybe. I'm thinking of the frog and the scorpion here. Look, I want him to play because it makes for a better watch and it's more exciting. And we've talked about everything that's great about the game via Japan. So Finn Russell, absolutely play him. When I said 12-minute crossfield kick like that, and I'm saying no, that's me thinking as a coach, can I really trust him? So I don't know. Finn Russell, did he do enough to tempt you? Would you put him on the bench?
Yeah, I think I definitely have him involved in the matchday squad. I'm still undecided as whether he's done enough for me on the back of that performance yesterday or on Saturday, sorry. I watched the game yesterday, so I'm a day behind, but I loved the combination of Dan Biggar and Conor Murray, and I thought Dan Biggar was probably the most overall consistent 10 in the Six Nations. And I think it would be incredibly harsh to drop him, considering how well he even played against Japan the first week. And I know it's all different, but I do absolutely love Finn Russell's flair. And I think a lot's going to be. He might not start the first test, but I think depending on how South Africa defend and how they line up, you could need someone like a Finn Russell to be able to unlock that defence and to find the spaces, because the way he kick passes is almost like he throws the ball forward. Like, that's how deft the touch is, so that it's easy for people to run onto. And if you're going to look to have the likes of Damien Delande, Pollard, Creel, 10, 12, 13, these big, huge, enormous guys that are going to come flying off the line, well, then the space is obviously going to be in behind or out wide. And the ball will probably go quicker in the air off a boot than it will through a couple of pairs of hands. So from that perspective, he could be the key to unlock it. For me, it's just lack of control. Like, even the intercept he almost threw, I know they had penalty advantage, but I don't even know if he knew they had an advantage underneath the posts, where the Lions winger nearly intercepted, and Rhys Sammet got absolutely mangled, up on that line just a couple of phases later. So, but he can mix the sublime with the absolute ridiculous. It's whether, as Keith said, you can roll that back in an extra 5%. And I do think that if he plays, then Owen Farrell has to play. And I'm not even sure Owen Farrell is the best 12 on the tour.
Well, on that, so I wanted to put Stuart Barnes to you yesterday in the Sunday Times. He paints a very grim picture of where Farrell is. So he says, twice he lost possession, uncomfortable in the role of heavy-duty carrier, while his organising and encouraging tones echoed around at empty Ellis Park. There were few tangible positives. It was his missed tackle that set an uninspired home team en route for the try line. He was slow to adopt his position, sloppy in the tackle. It was an undoubted negative in these early days. And frankly, the first 40 minutes were a reminder that he's struggling for form. The idea of 12 is not without merit, especially as backup kicker with Russell on the bench, but he is devoid of confidence. Gatlin gave Farrell 20 minutes at fly half. He did nothing wrong, but if he's to start the series, he needs to be doing a lot more right. So devoid of confidence was Barnes's read on Farrell, Keith.
No, I don't go with that. I'm not Farrell's biggest fan. I think he's a very good player and a really good competitor. I know Stuart Barnes doesn't particularly like him. He is the anti-Stuart Barnes as a player, and if any of our listeners can remember what Stuart Barnes was like, he was a very short, fast, nippy, outrageous 10 is what he was, but he wasn't conservative, goal-kicking, hard, steely competitor like Farrell is. I think Farrell is a proper test beast. I think, to be honest, the Lions used him really poorly at the weekend. And I do want to just touch on one other thing that Niamh said, whether people have played. I don't think anybody has played themselves onto the test team from that, and you couldn't have. You can't, even if you play really well, you can only do what you can do against the team that you're playing against. You can't read too much into that at all. You can't read the fact that some guys have been training together for 3 weeks and some guys for 7 days, that you can say that these guys are going to be there or not. So I don't think that that's a fair reflection. And Gatland has already said it, that he's going to really look at how players are training and playing and doing it. But if you're using Farrell as a crashing 12, that's a stupid thing to do. That's not what he is. He is the reason to have it, and we've had this discussion, first 5'8", second 5'8" in New Zealand. It's the two playmakers at 10 and 12. That idea of having another playmaker, it doesn't mean you crash him into people. There's just a pointless use of it. You wouldn't want to do it with your 10. I was looking at something on just on the same point of tens. Marcus Smith played against the States for England at the weekend on Sunday. He's a guy who can pass the ball like a kick and nearly as fast as a kick. His passing is just a joy to watch. But I saw him running in to be part of a tackle, and the opportunity was for him to go in and win the ruck. Or compete in the ruck. I'm not going to say win the ruck, compete in the ruck. And he didn't. He stepped out and out of the way. And I was half thinking, is that a little bit cowardly?
I was just going to say, that's how I would play the game there. That'd be my instinct.
No, and I said, actually no, because I don't want my 10 to be bridging over a ruck and having some big hefty front row forward running in and bashing in on top of him. I want him to be back outside, and I just thought he has a high level of preservation that some of the guys don't have. And there's nothing cowardly about him because he's a fantastic defender.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward.